Good morning. It is Thursday, May 20th. Will the House please come to order? Members, before we begin our work this morning, will you please join me in a moment of silence? Thank you. Are there any announcements? Give members one more moment. Are there any announcements? Seeing none. Orders of the day. Members, the order of bills this morning will start off with S62 and then move to S79. Senate Bill 62 is an act relating to creating incentives for new remote and relocation workers. Please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S62, an act relating to creating incentives for new remote and relocating workers.
The question is, shall the bill pass in concurrence with proposal of amendment? Are you ready for the question? If so, please unmute yourselves for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed the bill in concurrence with proposal of amendment. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to message our action? Can you please offer us a motion to suspend our rules in order to message our action on Senate Bill 62 to the Senate forthwith?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to suspend rules in order to message our actions to the Senate on S62 forthwith.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, please unmute yourselves for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have voted to suspend our rules in order to message our action on Senate Bill 62 to the Senate forthwith. Senate Bill 79 is an act relating to improving rental housing, health, and safety. The bill was referred to the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs, which recommends that the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill as printed in today's calendar. Representative Stevens of Waterbury will report for the committee. Affecting the revenue of the state, the bill was referred to the Committee on Ways and Means, which recommends that the report of the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs be amended as printed in today's calendar. Representative Maslin of Thetford will speak for the committee. Then carrying an appropriation, the bill was referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs and the Committee on Ways and Means. Representative Tolino of Brattleboro will speak for the committee. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
S79, an act relating to improving rental housing, health, and safety.
Member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The text of the bill may be found in today's calendar on page 2846, and there is a...
Hey, Bob. You, come on
Can
in.
we please get an all mute? My apologies, member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The text of the bill may be found on today's calendar on page 2846. There is a joint, or there's a joint fiscal office fiscal note on our website, as well as a link to a report on the rental housing stabilization program that members may be interested in reading when we get to the conversation about the eviction moratorium. Madam Speaker, S79 proposes 3 initiatives that have been in discussion for years. Your General Housing and Military Affairs Committee has been both interested and concerned about the issues raised in these initiatives for more than several biennia, and these concerns led 2 biennia ago to form a Rental Housing Advisory Board in Act 188 of 2018, the charge for which was to address some very fundamental and yet complex issues related to the health and safety of rental dwelling units in the state of Vermont. The basic issues raised mirrored those which your Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs have been grappling with for years. At a time when housing, especially housing that's affordable to Vermonters making less than the area median income, is in short supply, and when we have not been able to fund an appropriate amount of new affordable housing through our existing budget and programmatic processes, how can we determine what and where the problems are? How can we assure that they are safe, healthy, and habitable? And how can we incentivize private property owners to bring unused, non-code compliant dwelling units back on the line safely, and in return for this investment of public money, to make sure these units are affordable for the near future? These issues came initially from the Rental Housing Advisory Board, which was made of various public and private members of the housing communities and included advocates for town health officers, landlords, tenants, housing organizations, and the administration. The recommendations made in their 2019 study have been contemplated for 2 years now and have evolved in ways that reflect the support from the many facets of the housing communities, including those who served on the board. Madam Speaker, I think it's appropriate to share with the body a short history and primer on housing in Vermont, especially affordable housing, because this bill deals with issues that are historic, chronic, and in the case of the eviction moratorium, contemporary. Your General Housing and Military Affairs Committee, and perhaps other committees, are familiar with the vocabulary and concepts regarding housing in Vermont, and will be using terms and acronyms that may or may not be familiar to the body as a whole. First, there are the definitions and the numbers. By the definition provided by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, housing is affordable when it allows the owner or the tenant to live in a dwelling unit and pay for basic services with up to 30% of their income. Over 50% of all Vermont renters pay over 30% of their monthly income for rent and housing expenses, and 50% of those pay over 50% of their monthly income for rent and housing expenses, and are considered extremely cost burdened, making it difficult to pay for food, transportation, childcare, or health care. Second, how many Vermonters live in rental units? Approximately 30% statewide. Given our new census numbers, that means over 190,000 Vermonters rent where we live. Third, owning and managing rental properties is, according to data provided by our Rental Housing Advisory Board, a $900 million a year business. Fourth, we will use terms like 80% of AMI or 120% of AMI. AMI means area median income, and it is a number established by HUD. It's different in different corners of the state. For instance, using 2018 numbers, the average median household income for all households in Chittenden may be as high as just over $73,000, while in Caledonia County, it may be just over $50,000. In Essex County, it may be just over $44,000, while in Washington County, it may be just under $63,000. Fifth, HUD determines fair market rents, which is a number used by HUD to determine what payments made by vouchers shall be, such as Section 8. As we've seen in the last year, rents and purchase prices of homes have increased by upwards of 20% in some communities. True market rates, as seen when one is looking for an apartment, are almost always higher, no matter what community you are living in. Sixth, vacancy rates across the state is approximately 3.4%. Among subsidized housing for Vermonters earning less than 80% of AMI, the vacancy rate is less than 1%. This means that there are very few apartments available, especially those that we categorize as affordable. Seventh, there are many ways that we as a state provide affordable housing, either through subsidized housing that allows for a less than market rental rate to be charged, or through individual or project-based vouchers. And there are many different kinds of individual vouchers available through our housing and human service organizations, as well as the state. Vouchers can be used if the property owners or landlords accept them, and the individual ones stay with the tenant wherever they may go and until they no longer qualify based on income. Project-based vouchers stay with the apartment, and we have apartment owners who receive a percentage of the rent every month via the placement of the voucher with the apartment and not the tenant. The tenant is responsible, usually up to 30% of their income, for the balance of the rent. These landlords may be private development companies, or they may be a nonprofit housing organization. What's important to remember here is that not everyone who qualifies receives a voucher, and the majority of cost-burdened Vermonters do not have one. Eighth, we took testimony that there are now, by best estimates, 8,000 dwelling units being used as short-term rentals in the state. Ninth, we took testimony that there are approximately 19,000 rentals that are vacant due to non-compliance with health and safety codes or due to basic habitability standards. And 10th, over 180,000 Vermont income taxpayers representing over 400,000 Vermonters file an income tax report for less than $50,000. If you add this all up, Madam Speaker, you have what your General Housing and Military Affairs Committee has been working on for several decades, a housing crunch that is blooming into a crisis in front of our eyes. We're not unique in this. States across the country are reporting similar increases in rent costs, along with increases in property values, taxes, utility costs, and availability. Our Vermont Housing and Conservation Board was founded in the 1980s, and a property transfer tax was instituted in recognition that the housing price boom then, as now, was pricing lower income Vermonters out of the market. The housing that was built tended to be for middle-class Vermonters and above, up in the elevations. VHCB was formed to try to raise funds from the source of the increases in land and housing to conserve open landscapes and farms and other natural resources that we use to define Vermont, and to creatively fund new housing meant to be permanently affordable for Vermonters who are trying to build a nest egg to build their own home, or while they worked entry-level jobs before they moved up the pay ladder. But it was never enough, for a number of reasons. A majority of the communities in this state have seen the good work of VHCB, ranging from conserving key pieces of land or public use, or rebuilding a block of housing and commercial development in a downtown after a flood or a fire. When the pandemic started, it exposed what the housing community knew all along. There are not enough dwelling units, single-family homes or apartments, for the number of Vermonters who are either experiencing homelessness or were seeking healthy and safe places to live during a time when there was a stay safe at home order. And to the point of proposing a rental registry, we don't easily know where these units are. Your committee also knew that it was becoming prohibitively expensive for private developers to build new housing. For a long time, we considered $180,000 to $200,000 to be a reasonable amount of money to build a starter home with land. But those numbers are long gone. Quarter-acre lots with the necessary permits and water and sewer infrastructure may cost well over $300,000 for a small house. A new market rate 2 to 3 bedroom rental unit will cost over $2,000 in rent, and the same subsidized unit in a renovated building or even new, developed by a nonprofit housing agency, may cost over $300,000 per unit. So what does S79 do to help with these fundamental problems with this crisis? S79 is a housing bill. It's a public safety and health bill, and it's an economic development bill. F79 will shift the enforcement of health and safety issues related to code compliance and habitability in rental units from the municipalities and their volunteer health officers, with the support of the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns, to the Department of Fire Safety, and it will fund it with a $35 fee on each long and short-term dwelling unit that is not already charged a fee by their local municipality for being on a health and safety rental registry. S79 will fulfill a need for comprehensive rental housing data. It is difficult to plan for future housing if you don't know where current housing is located. It is difficult to respond to a pandemic or a natural disaster if you don't know how you can help displaced Vermonters find housing. It's difficult to locate property owners and landlords in order to notify them about changes to code or to landlord-tenant law, or about programs like the back rent programs developed since March of last year, or programs like the ones proposed in this bill that may provide them with resources to bring unsafe and unused dwelling units back online. And while there are a number of different lists of public information available, like grand lists, the E911 list, tax department landlord certificates, the lead paint prevention registry, and even the COVID-related back rent or rehabilitation programs from last year, there is no systemic way to use this information. A rental registry will allow us to know where these dwelling units are, both long and short term, of which there are between 6,000 and 8,000 statewide. The Vermont Chamber of Commerce and the Department of Housing and Community Development testified that they are interested in understanding this data. And the Vermont Landlord Association, Vermont Legal Aid, VHCB, and VLCT supported this long-sought goal, which is to consolidate the information we have into one database of residential rental units and the property owners from information that is already available in some form to the public. S79 will provide incentives to landlords to bring their non-compliant apartments back online with the help of grants or loans, provided they rent at HUD-based fair market rents, and give priority to households coming out of homelessness or who are eking out a living at 80% of area median income or less. VHIP is a very cost-effective way to get more housing online and encourage property owners to do repairs. This would be similar to several pilot programs of DHCD, who would take the lead, partnering with area housing organizations to facilitate the program and provide support to the applicants and owners. S79 is an economic development bill because it proposes creating a revolving loan fund that may provide up to $50,000 to first-time home buyers to buy existing units that need rehabilitation in the form of a 0% loan that will be paid back upon the refinancing or sale of the home. The Vermont Homeownership Revolving Loan Fund is, for Vermont, a groundbreaking program that will provide funds to first-time home buyers whose income reaches up to 120% of the area median income. Details of this program will follow in this presentation. And finally, S79 is a rental unit stabilization bill, offering property owners and landlords additional help in keeping their rental unit business stable through additional emergency avenues to deal with difficult tenancies. It's important for the state to maintain the eviction moratorium, which was implemented due to public health and safety requirements to the pandemic. And it is equally important to provide property owners and landlords individual additional avenues to try to recoup lost rental income due to non-payment or their property if it is being damaged or in danger of being damaged. And now, Madam Speaker, to the bill. I'll be reporting sections 1 through 7. And again, you can follow along with the bill in today's calendar. Section 1 of the bill adds language to Title 20 VSA Chapter 173 to give the Division of Fire Safety within the Department of Public Safety the primary authority at the state level to regulate rental housing, health, and safety. And you'll see with the underlining in the bill that there's changes to the chapter heading, the subchapter heading, also in 2729. And there are technical changes throughout here to reflect the scope of the DPS authority. Section 2730 adds rental housing to the lists of to the definition of what a public building is. Section B4 strikes the exemption for a single-family residence with an accessory dwelling unit. And with this change, a single-family resident remains exempt unless used for rental purposes, and an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, is subject to DPS authority, and DPS is the Department of Public Safety. Section 2731, it adds DPS authority of health, safety, sanitation, and fitness for habitation of buildings. And this is, so in this section, when it comes to inspections, it's important to remember that the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Fire Safety already has access to commercial properties. Rentals are considered commercial properties but until this proposal, they did not have the authority to issue and adopt rules regarding the health, safety, sanitation, and fitness for habitation of buildings. This was this was found in the Department of Health section, I believe Title 18, and it was handled by town health officers. Section B1 strikes just the two words "from fire" to reflect a broader scope of application with the addition of rental housing, health, and safety. Section B3 creates and outlines an inspection reporting requirement for when the Department of Public Safety conducts an inspection of rental housing. And subsection C under B3 requires a DPS to require the notice of inspection directly to all tenants if the entire building is affected by a violation. And while all of this information looks new, it is information that is in the Department of Health and has been transferred here while transferring this authority. Section 2733 requires in subsection C, it requires a DPS to serve notice of an order to repair, rehabilitate, or remove a building to all persons who will be temporarily or permanently displaced by the order. Other changes within this section are technical in nature. 2734, 2736, and 2738 are technical corrections only to existing statute. And that's just initializing or uppercasing certain references to commissioner or state primarily. And just to clarify, and then we go down to section 2. I'm sorry. Section 2 of the bill creates a state rental housing registry. In section A, this gives the authority for the Department of Housing and Community Development, in coordination with the Department of Fire, Division of Fire Safety, Department of Health, and the Enhanced 911 Board, and the Department of Taxes to create and maintain the registry for dwelling units and short-term rentals as defined. Section B, the Department of Housing and Community Development shall require for each unit that is registered the following data: the name and the mailing address of the owner, landlord, and property manager, phone number and electronic mail of the owner, landlord, and property manager, the location, the year built, the type of rental unit, number of units in the building, school property account number, accessibility of the unit, and any other information the department deems appropriate. Subsection C provides exceptions to the registration. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead to section 3. Subsection 2 here, the department says it may disclose data it collects pursuant to this section to other state, municipal, or regional government entities, to nonprofit organizations, or to other persons for the purposes of protecting public health and safety. This section, and it shall not disclose the data it collects pursuant to this section for a commercial purpose, and it shall require as a condition of receiving data collected pursuant to this section that a person to whom the department discloses the data takes necessary steps to protect the privacy of persons whom the data concerns, to protect the data from further disclosure, and to comply with subdivision B of this subsection D. And this allows the department to share the information again with municipalities or organizations that are seeking out housing under emergency purposes to protect the public health and safety. I'll use as a local example. When downtown Waterbury was flooded in Tropical Storm Irene, we had no way of knowing where else we could house people in an emergency situation. And in some cases, it took days or weeks to find temporary housing for people after the flood. This would have allowed access to the organizations who are helping those folks find homes. Section 3, the rental housing registration section. And this section will be discussed further in the ways and means amendment. So I'm going to just slide down a little bit to discuss the exemptions that are here, which is section C1A. An owner of a mobile home lot within a mobile home park who has registered the lot with the Department of Housing and Community Development and who does not own a mobile home on that lot is exempt from registering the lot pursuant to the section. In other words, the land under which the mobile home sits is not required to be registered. An owner of a mobile home lot within a mobile home park who has registered the lot with the department and who owns a mobile home on the lot that's available for rent or rented shall register the property with the department and shall pay a fee equal required to the subdivision. And the department already runs a mobile home registration. And so they would continue to pay into that. An owner of a mobile home who rents the mobile home, whether or not located in a mobile home park, shall register pursuant to this section. Section 2, the registration requirements of this section do not apply to housing that an owner provides to another person, whether or not for consideration, if and only to the extent that the owner does not otherwise make such housing available for lease to the general public. And this is an important exemption. If the housing is provided to a member of the owner's family or personal acquaintances, if the housing provided to a person who is not related to a member of the owner's household and who occupies the housing as part of a nonprofit home sharing program, and the housing provided to a person who provides personal care to the owner or a member of the owner's household. Section 3, and there will be another piece soon after this to discuss this as well. An owner of housing that is provided as a benefit of farm employment as defined in 9 VSA section 4469A(a)(3) is exempt from the registration requirements imposed in this section. And this is to acknowledge the fact that there are farms primarily, but not solely dairy farms, where housing is provided to people as a condition of their employment. And that it's not technically rent, but that we took testimony in a separate hearing on agricultural housing where it was clear that some farmers would have a difficult time, number one, hearing about the registry and then paying $35 per unit. And so for a period of three years from now, till January 1, 2024, these apartments, these units would be exempt from the registration. They would not be exempt from the health and safety codes, but they would be exempt from the registration. And we've talked to members of the agricultural community and advocates to continue discussions on the needs of the agricultural housing in their community. Section D is a penalty for failure to register. This will be dealt with in the Ways and Means Amendment. And then E is simply the Department of Housing and Community Development shall maintain the registration fees in a special fund. And that fund will hire authorized staff to administer the registry and registration requirements imposed in the section and section 2478 of this title. And it will provide funding to the Department of Public Safety to hire authorized staff to conduct inspections and regulate housing pursuant to 20 VSA Chapter 173. Section 3A is a repeal that creates a prospective repeal of the registration exemption for housing provided as benefit for farm employment. Section 4 authorizes up to 5 full-time classified inspector positions under DPS. And it asks for a first payment of $100,000 to be appropriated from the general fund for one-time startup funding to hire 1 or more inspector positions authorized pursuant to the subsection A. The department may hire additional inspectors authorized by this section to the extent funds become available from the special fund. This is to the $100,000 is to hire 1 person to have a vehicle and equipment. And it would be, as the fund is created and stocked with monies from the fees, that will be, they will be allowed to hire up to 5 people to do inspections on a complaint-driven basis statewide. Section 5 authorizes 1.5 full-time positions, so 1 full-time classified and 1 half-time classified. Of course, the registry requirements. And in the year 2022, we have requested $300,000 to be appropriated from the general fund to DHCD in one-time startup funding to hire the positions authorized pursuant to this section. And they may hire people, they may hire up to the authorized number of people in this bill when funds become available. Section 6 makes technical and conforming changes in Title 18 concerning local health officers. It repeals the inspection report requirement that is specific to local health officers and provides instead that if it is the local officer doing an inspection, the officer will issue a report consistent with the Department of Public Safety inspection reporting requirements in Title 20. This again is in response to the fact that our town health officers are volunteer and not professional inspectors. And over the years, we have seen that they have been reluctant to or untrained to the point where they really cannot fulfill the health and safety requirements of our rental safety housing codes. And so again, with conversations with VLCT, they support the notion of moving the responsibility for these inspections to the Department of Fire Safety. But the town health officers will also be available to work with the department if the department is not available. Section 7 are transition provisions. This isn't going to happen overnight. So this provides that over the course of the next several months, or as long as it takes, that there will be transition about rule adoption and working as the Department of Fire Safety takes on the responsibilities from the town health officers and incorporating. And there's a provision here in Section 2 where the Commissioner of Public Safety may immediately adopt a rule incorporating the Rental Housing Health Code without following the procedures otherwise required for general rulemaking. But except for that, they shall comply with the requirements of rulemaking. And that completes sections 1 through 7. Madam Speaker, I yield the floor to the member from Burlington.
The member from Waterbury yields to the member from Burlington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll now report on sections 8 through 15 of the bill, which can be found on pages 2734 through 2739 of the House calendar. These sections add subchapter 3 to 10 BSA chapter 29 to create and fund 2 programs: the Vermont Housing Investment Program, or VHIP, and the Vermont Homeownership Revolving Loan Fund. And each is designed, as the member from Waterbury said, to address chronic shortages in and access to affordable housing. And I will report on each of these programs. Sections 8 through 10 establish VHIP, a voluntary competitive grant or loan program made available to private property owners who wish to bring vacant, blighted, non-code compliant units or newly created accessory dwellings into the housing market. The grant program prioritizes leasing to tenants who are currently unhoused. Incentivizing property owners to lease their units to people exiting homelessness isn't a new idea. It's common practice among nonprofit housing organizations. Testimony offered by the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board asserted that nearly 1/3 of all publicly funded affordable housing units that turned over last year were leased to households exiting homelessness. Incentivizing private property owners for the same purpose isn't a new idea either. Indeed, this body last year funded a version of VHIP through the CARES Act as part of a suite of housing initiatives prompted by the pandemic. Between August 2020 through April of this year, VHIP grants averaging $22,000 have brought over 208 privately owned units back online as affordable rental units, 1/3 of them leased to households exiting homelessness. This is the mark of a successful pilot and a cost-effective strategy to help transition some of the 2,000 individuals living currently in state-supported motels to affordable homes. Madam Speaker, I turn now to the specific provisions of the bill concerning VHIP. Section 8 affirms VHIP's purpose to incentivize significant improvements to the quality and efficiency of offline or non-compliant rental housing through state-funded grants and loans. Section 9 adds subchapter 3, division 699 to 10 VSA chapter 29 to establish the VHIP program within the Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD. Statewide and or regional nonprofits who will make program grants and loans will be required by DHCD to establish administrative systems and standards by which applications for the grants or loans will be evaluated and awarded. VHIP offers individuals the choice of applying for a grant or a loan. Neither grants nor loans can exceed $30,000 per unit, and they must be matched with funds or in-kind services equal to or exceeding 20% of the project's value. Both require that projects comply with applicable building, housing, and health codes. Both require property owners to accept housing vouchers that are available to a tenant. The terms and conditions of both grant and loan awards apply to the original recipient and to successors in interest for the effective period of the grant or loan. And finally, the identity of a grant or loan recipient and the amount of the award are public records and updated monthly. Section 9 outlines the ways in which the terms of VHIP grants and loans differ. Grants are forgivable over a period of 5 years. Loans are forgiven over 10 years. Although both programs bring units into compliance and onto the rental market, a grant recipient further agrees to rent to a household transitioning from homelessness, a higher bar that is rewarded with a shorter forgiveness timetable. More specifically, grant recipients must agree to work with local housing partners to identify potential tenants who are exiting homelessness. This is consistent with the program funded last year through the CARES Act. The bill does provide that if a property owner and the department or a nonprofit housing partner determine that no one exiting homelessness is available to lease the unit, it may be leased to a household whose total income is equal to or less than 80% of area median income, or AMI. And if no such household is available, a landlord would be able to lease the rental to another household with the approval of the department or housing organization. If no vouchers are available for a tenant, an owner is required to set cost and rent and utilities at less than or equal to the applicable fair market rent as set by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. And upon satisfying these requirements for a period of 5 years, the grant is forgiven and all conditions permanently lifted. A forgivable loan requires property owners to accept all housing vouchers that are available to pay all or a portion of the tenant's rent and utilities and price the rental unit at or below the area fair market rent as defined by HUD in the event that no vouchers are available. There are no similar tenancy requirements. For each year that a loan recipient meets these requirements, 10% of the loan will be forgiven. If a participant chooses to opt out of the program before the 10-year life of the loan, he or she would be responsible for paying off any part that has not been forgiven. It's important to note that Section 9 provides a grantee the option, if desired, to convert a grant to a forgivable loan with the permission of the department and the nonprofit housing partner. And in such conversations, the total value of the loan would, in such conversions, the total value of the loan would be reduced by 10% for each year a property owner had participated in the grant program. VHIP grants and forgivable loans are subordinate to any existing liens filed on the property at the time of the grant or forgivable loan is recorded, and subordinate to first mortgage that's refinanced and recorded after a VHIP loan or grant is recorded. Section 10 requires DHCD to submit a report on or before February 15th, 2022 concerning program design, implementation, and outcomes and findings, and make any recommendations concerning the amount of grant awards. Madam Speaker, now I would like to turn to section 11 of the bill, which establishes the Vermont Homeownership Revolving Loan Fund. Homeownership remains the principal way most families build wealth in this country. It's often beyond the reach of a first-time home buyer to make a down payment and borrow the additional funds to make repairs that do not create immediate equity, like weatherization or structural and component fixes, but are necessary. The revolving loan fund will help those first-time home buyers through zero interest loans of up to $50,000. For the purposes of this program, eligible homes are existing single-family dwellings, multifamily dwelling with not more than 4 units, a mobile home, a condominium, or an accessory dwelling unit. Building on this body's long-standing commitment to broadening access to home ownership and consistent with the governor's budget recommendation, Section 11 of the bill affirms a specific commitment to increasing home ownership rates for Black, Indigenous, and people of color in Vermont, households that have historically lacked access to capital and experienced discrimination in the housing market. According to a UVM legislative research report published less than a month ago, the homeownership gap between white and Black Vermonters is striking. While 72.3% of white Vermonters own their homes, which is consistent with the national average, only 21.1% of Black Vermonters do, a rate that is half the national average of 42.2%. Closing the racial home ownership gap is a critical indicator of whether we're on course to be a fair, just society with equal access to opportunity for all. Section 12 dives into the administrative aspects of the fund. It names the Department of Housing and Community Development as its administrative home and charges the department with designing and implementing the fund. They're working with statewide and or regional nonprofit housing organizations to identify and vet prospective borrowers and issue loans. To be eligible for a loan through the fund, an applicant must be a first-time home buyer in Vermont, have a household income of not more than 120% of area median income, and occupy the dwelling as a primary residence. Housing organizations are allowed under this section to give priority to an applicant whose employer provides a down payment assistance or funding for rehabilitation costs. Participating nonprofit housing lenders must develop a standard application form that describes the application process and offers instructions that will help prospective buyers, and awards process that ensures equitable selection of first-time home buyers, and a loan management system that will ensure accountability for funds awarded. Section 12 also explicitly directs DHCD, the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and the state's homeownership centers to work closely with named organizations or officials, the Vermont chapters of the NAACP, AALV, the U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants, the Executive Director of the Office of Racial Equity, the Vermont Commission on Native American Affairs, and local racial justice organizations, so that Black, Indigenous, and people of color who have known historic housing discrimination know about and have equitable access to these funds. Loans shall not exceed a standard limit set by the department, which shall not exceed $50,000. They shall be zero interest loans. Payments shall be suspended while the home buyer occupies the home. They shall be due in full upon the sale or transfer of the home, or upon refinancing with the approval of the department or housing organization that issued the loan. Projects may include a weatherization component and shall comply with all applicable building, housing, and safety laws. A home buyer may apply no more than 25% of the loan towards the purchase down payment and associated closing costs and fees. And a home buyer who receives a loan through the program is required to repay the loan. The program is established as a revolving loan fund, directing that loans that are paid back shall be used to support future loans. A loan issued by the program is subordinate to any existing liens on the property at the time of the grant or the loan, and is subordinate to a first mortgage that may be refinanced and recorded after a program loan is recorded. Section 13 of the bill affirms that the duties described in sections 11 and 12 are contingent upon available funding. Section 14 of the bill requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to submit a report to the General Assembly concerning the revolving loan fund's design, implementation outcomes, and recommendations by February 15th of next year. Finally, Section 15 of the bill appropriates $4 million from the general fund to the Department of Housing and Community Development, $3 million to support the VHIP program, and $1 million to the revolving loan fund. If passed, these sections will take effect on July 1st, 2021. I will now yield the floor back to the member from Waterbury for the remainder of our report.
The member from Burlington yields to the member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the final substantive section of the bill, besides the effective dates, are proposed amendments to the eviction moratorium, which was included in Act 101 from 2020. On March 11th of 2020, 2 days before the legislature closed its door at the State House in response to the shutdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic, your General Housing and Military Affairs Committee, along with all of your committees, was asked to review the potential immediate and long-standing effects the pandemic may have with relation to our committee portfolio. It did not take us long to focus on housing. We knew immediately that congregate settings would not be safe places to be. And we knew that within days or weeks of an economic shutdown that Vermonters would have a difficult time paying their rent and their mortgages. And we knew that wholesale evictions on top of our existing homelessness problems and the shortage of available and affordable apartments would have the potential to exacerbate the vulnerabilities of those whose housing was the most unstable in our state. Finding a way to deal with these issues became our priority, and in the weeks following the onset of the shutdown in Vermont, we worked with the key stakeholders in these fields: the Vermont Landlord Association, Vermont Legal Aid, our housing service providers, and our direct service providers to create a web of protection on behalf of the public health. We met with the advocates and providers and developed language we all felt was fair and interpretable by the courts, which were operating under their own emergency conditions, to prevent no-cause evictions based solely on non-payment of rent, but to provide relief to property owners and landlords with enough reasons to file emergency orders to move an eviction case forward. With an influx of funding from the coronavirus relief funds, we were able to stand up a rental arrearage program for landlords and tenants to pay back rent. What did the eviction moratorium do? In short, it allowed for the filing of eviction notices, but disallowed service of notice to tenants during the emergency period plus 30 days. It created categories that a court could consider as emergencies for service to happen, and it created a process for that to happen. The eviction moratorium also made clear that the tenant was not being granted a rent holiday. If they were able to pay, this moratorium expressly stated that it remained due. But mostly what the eviction moratorium did was it kept people safe at home during a pandemic. And as part of our program to keep formerly people who were experiencing homelessness in motels, it kept people who were economically vulnerable in their homes for the duration. And we ended up with one of the lowest infection rates in the country. All of these rules, of course, are temporary. They're session long, and they will expire 30 days after the end of the emergency period, which is determined by the governor. What is important to know about the work that went into the eviction moratorium, which turned into Act 101, is that both landlord advocates and tenant advocates acknowledge the gravity of the public health and the economic situation. The initial rules issued by the Treasury Department did not include commercial property owners or landlords as businesses that could apply for relief, but they did allow, as we interpreted them, for payment of back rent on residential residences. Property owners could support the moratorium because they did not want to throw people out during a public health and safety crisis, and they knew a back rent program was forthcoming. And the tenants advocates could support the moratorium with the emergency provisions because they knew that if landlords lost their properties due to the pandemic, that less available dwelling units would exacerbate an already dire housing market. As mentioned earlier, approximately 70% of all eviction proceedings are due to back rent. 70% of all eviction proceedings are due to back rent. Another 15 to 20% are due to back rent and communication issues. And the remaining 10 to 15% are the intractable cases that many of us have heard about through the emails, letters, phone calls, and testimony. This percentage played out with the programming developed using the CRF. 90% of all applications were successful in some way, either a full or partial payment of back rent. And in cases where full repayment happened, those cases were removed from the eviction dockets. Act 101, in conjunction with the back rent program, was a success. Vermonters who were in danger of losing their home during a pandemic were allowed to stay in place, and out of the nearly 3,000 applications filed, only 300 were not filled. Adjacent to the moratorium and the back rent program, we were able to house upwards of 2,500 Vermonters, including on average 350 children in hotels and not in shelters. Using federal dollars, nearly $25 million was paid to landlords and property owners for back rent during 2020, and over $100 million is available in 2021 for income eligible tenants. But as with any program, no matter how well intentioned and supported, even during a pandemic, unique cases fell through the cracks. Landlords and tenants with antagonistic histories remained antagonistic. Tenants with the perceived ability to pay rent chose to treat the moratorium as a rent holiday. With the surprising increase in home prices, property owners wished to sell, and some property owners wished to move back to their home in Vermont, but could not get the tenant to leave or to participate in the back rent programs. The rules changed on the federal level on who was eligible to qualify for this year's program and who could apply, and restrictions are in place about how that application must happen, thereby limiting a landlord's options towards receiving both back rent and, in a positive twist, rent moving forward. The cases we heard about, that you heard about, are important, and there's a distinct increase in tension between some landlords and tenants. Some folks wanted the opportunity to receive back rent, and some wanted the ability to automatically evict tenants because of any number of reasons, many of them moving. Our proposal will allow some extra considerations for property owners to use when applying for emergency ejectment proceedings during this current emergency period. Madam Speaker, S79 proposes to adjust the eviction moratorium in a way that broadens the emergency conditions that can be cited to open an eviction proceeding during the moratorium. Section 16 makes clear that the courts can act in an emergency pursuant to their operating orders contained in Administrative Order 49. When we passed the moratorium last year, AO 49 contained a provision suspending all but emergency hearings due to the pandemic. That provision is no longer contained in AO 49, but the reference is still useful because we do not know in what ways the Supreme Court will restrict or not restrict evictions and emergency hearings coming out of the pandemic. Section 17 modifies subsection I of Act 101, setting out various reasons a court may decide to hold an emergency hearing in an eviction action and the procedures to be following when considering that action. Subsection I1 makes clear that any action to proceed on an emergency basis will be done pursuant to Vermont Rule of Civil Procedure 65. This is the longstanding court rule setting out procedures for hearing cases on an emergency basis. Section I1A sets out the 4 situations included in Act 101 for emergency hearings, and now specifically includes the tampering, disabling, or removing of some of carbon monoxide or smoke detectors as activities that may trigger an emergency hearing. Sections I1B through D set out 3 new areas for the courts to consider when deciding whether to hold an emergency hearing. B, landlords need to occupy rental premises. We heard from several landlords who had leased their premises for a fixed period of time who needed to return to it for their own housing, but who were unable to when the tenant refused to leave. We also heard from property owners who purchased a home to act as their primary residence with tenants who would not leave prior to the sale of the property and continue to have no success in having them move, even with the rental assistance program in place through the Vermont Emergency Rental Assistance Program. C, the tenant is not participating in or does not qualify for the emergency rental assistance program. We heard that a number of landlords believe their tenants can pay rent, but are simply refusing to. This provision would allow the landlord to ask the court to hear the case on an emergency basis. Section D provides a catch-all when the tenancy causes immediate or irreparable injury, loss, or damage to the property, the landlord, or other residents. This would allow a landlord who is suffering from some other loss to apply to the court to have the tenant evicted. A landlord who felt the property was being seriously damaged or wanted to sell the rental unit could ask the court for a hearing. Section I-2 provides the process by which the court will proceed on an emergency basis. There will be a motion supported by an affidavit. If the court determines that the plaintiff has alleged sufficient facts to warrant an emergency hearing, the court shall A, issue any necessary preliminary orders, B, schedule a hearing, C, allow the plaintiff to serve the defendant with all the court papers, including a notice of hearing, and D, after a hearing, issue any necessary orders which may include a writ of possession. These provisions are consistent with Rule 65 and again, familiar to courts and attorneys practicing landlord-tenant law. We felt that these were reasonable additions to Act 101, and we hope that you will support them. Sections 16 and 17 take effect upon passage. And on the effective date, Section 18 is the effective date section. The following section shall take effect on passage. Section 1, which is the authority for rental housing, health, and safety going to DPS. Section 2, the rental housing registry. Section 6, conforming changes to the Department of Health statutes. Section 7, the DPS rulemaking authority and transition provisions. And Section 16 and 17, this amendment to the eviction moratorium. The following sections will take effect on July 1, 2021. The fulfilling of the DPS positions, or the start of the hiring of the DPS positions. Section 5, the DHCD positions. Sections 8 through 10, the Vermont Housing Investment Program. Sections 11-14, Vermont Homeownership Revolving Loan Fund. Section 15, the appropriations. And Section 3, the rental housing registration will take effect on January 1, 2022. And Section 3A, with the repeal for the housing provided as a benefit of farm employment, shall take effect in January 1, 2024. Madam Speaker, the list of witnesses. We heard from the chair of the Rental Housing Advisory Board, the bill's sponsor, the executive director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, president of the Vermont Bankers Association, the director of Division of Fire Safety, Department of Public Safety, senior planner from the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission, housing program administrator from the Department of Housing and Community Development, legislative counsel from our Office of Legislative Counsel, the commissioner, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the director of policy and special projects for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, the director of public policy and advocacy, the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns, the founder and director of the Vermont Short-Term Rental Alliance, two staff attorneys from Vermont Legal Aid, past president from the Vermont Inn and Bed and Breakfast Association, the executive director from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, the vice president of tourism, the Vermont Chamber of Commerce, the director of advocacy and public affairs from the Vermont Association of Realtors, and the director of the Vermont Apartment Owners Association, which is also the Vermont Landlords Association. Madam Speaker, your General Housing and Military Affairs Committee voted S79 out of committee on a vote of 8-3-0, and we ask for the body's support.
And now speaking for the Committee on Ways and Means, member from Thetford, Representative Maslin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning. We thank the member from House General, the chair of House General, for his very thorough explanation and other comments on the necessity of this bill. And I'd just like to say the notion of a housing registry has been around for quite a long time. I remember discussion of the potential of a housing registry during my first term, which actually was at the end of the last century. So it's beginning, yeah, the end of the last century. That was quite a while ago. And now we're finally getting to creating a housing registry for all the excellent reasons that the chair of House General elaborated. Ways and Means looked at the bill. We did a thorough walkthrough of the bill, and particularly those parts of the bill that apply to the revenues of the state as most practically applied and collected. And that was really our job. And we made a few changes. The beginning of our amendment is at the very bottom of page 2866. And there is also a fiscal note on the Ways and Means page. You may find that in several other places as well, but that may be the most practical way to find it. And I would say we amended section 3 primarily. We replaced section 3A with a new 3A and 3B, which incorporates much of the material from the original bill from House General. But we clarified a few things that we think would make things more practical as going forward. In section 3A, we specify that the beginning of the program for registration, the date certain on which registration will begin will be March 1st of next year. We picked a clean, certain date because that is something that should be universally recognized throughout the housing industry, and we wanted to make sure that that is clear. And we also included it on line 15, if you have a copy with line numbers, included short-term rental units. These are defined in 18 VSA 4301. If members want to go and find what a short-term rental is, it's something that Ways and Means had spent some time on before, and we wanted to make sure that we were being inclusive. We also looked pretty carefully at the exemptions that Ways and Means that House General has crafted. I left those largely intact with but we did work with Legislative Counsel on making sure that the definitions were clearly understandable and straightforward. In section 3A on our amendment, we changed the fee, administrative fee, the administrative penalty from $100 to $200, but we know it says up to, not more than $200. We think if we're going to do this, that rental unit owners should take it seriously, and as would say in other forums, get with the program. So those are the principal changes. With regards to our fiscal note, we note the collections that were described in House General's presentation. During the first year, the rental housing registration fees are likely to total $840,000. General fund appropriation, $100,000 to Department of Fire and Safety, $300,000 to the general fund from the general fund to the HCD, and the other appropriations for the programs that of totaling $4 million that were described in House General's presentation, totaling $5,240,000. That was during the first year, during FY22, next fiscal year. During the following subsequent years, it is estimated that the $35 per unit fee per year will bring in slightly over $1 million. And all things being equal, that would make the program self-sustainable after that point. We're not exactly sure what the collection of registration fees will be, but it does appear that it'll make the program self-sustaining, and we anticipate that the collection of fees will slowly grow over time as more rental units become available. And to get back to the general purposes of the bill, Madam Speaker, one of the things that is clear is that there are a lot of rental units out there that, in common parlance, we don't know where they are. And many of them have safety issues, fire issues, health issues. Many of us have constituents who have run into those issues with either with rental properties from tenants that we have heard from, or from landlords who have concerns about the conditions of their houses and rental units, and they can't be corrected with authority if we don't know where they are. And that is one of the important things that the registry will establish. And turning to the end of our amendment, noting the effective dates, that the registration will begin effective January 1st, 2022. That's next January. Penalty to fail for registration will be the following January, 2023. And the reason for that is that, as I said, we understand that it'll take some people who are, what's this, rental registry, we've never done this before, to essentially get with the program and comply. But as I hope we understand, this is for the benefit of Vermonters. It's certainly for the benefit of landlords if they appreciate the provisions of the bill. It's to the benefit of tenants. It's to the benefit of all of us. And also in the effective dates section, the repeal of registration for housing for the benefit of farm employment shall take place the following January, which was January 20 of 24. Madam Speaker, we heard from the chair of the House General Committee. We heard from Legislative Counsel, Office of Legislative Counsel. We heard from the Commissioner of Taxes. We heard from the Senior Analyst of JFO. We heard from the Director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. And I believe that's it. And on a vote of 7-3-1, Madam Speaker, we urge the body to approve this amendment and the bill as presented. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
And now speaking for the Committee on Appropriations, member from Brattleboro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning, members. The Committee on Appropriations had a walkthrough of the bill from the Chair of General Housing and Military Affairs and Legislative Counsel. We focused in on the jurisdictional area of our committee, which in this case was the obviously the appropriations, but specifically the $400,000 to the Department of Public Safety, the $3 million for the VHIP program, $1 million for the Homeownership Revolving Loan Fund, and issues in and around the creation and use of the special fund. Our questions were technical in nature and just seeking to ensure that the costs were appropriate for standing up the program in the initial phase for the Department of Public Service, and ensuring that the special fund had the appropriate authorities and the ability to be used in the way that it was intended. After a relatively brief conversation, the committee came to the conclusion that the bill did not need any tweaks and that we would take a position on it, and our position was to find it favorable, 8-1.
Now the question is, shall the report of the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs be amended as recommended by the Committee on Ways and Means? Member from Waterbury, Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciated the visits with both the Appropriations Committee and with the Ways and Means Committee, and grateful that I don't have to report a vote on the Appropriations report because it was just a report. We heard from Ways and Means yesterday, and I'd like to thank him for coming to the committee to explain that amendment that we just heard, and we supported that amendment by an 8-3-0 vote.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs be amended as recommended by the Committee on Ways and Means? Are you ready for the question? If so, please unmute yourselves for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
No.
No.
The ayes appear to have it.
Division.
I believe a division has been requested. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And when the clerk is ready, would you please record the votes and lower the hands? All those opposed, please raise your hand. When the clerk is ready, will she record the votes and lower the hands? Will the clerk please announce the results of the vote?
Those voting yes, 91. Those voting no, 44.
The ayes do have it, and you have amended the report of the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs. Now the question is, shall the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs as amended? Member from Poultney, Representative McCoy.
Madam Speaker, I request that the question be divided as follows. First, by considering sections 1 through 7, and in section 18, which is the effective date section, subdivisions A1 through 4, subdivisions B1 and 2, and subdivisions C through E. Second, by considering all remaining provisions of the committee report. And when we vote on the first subdivision, considering sections 1 through 17 and those 1 through 7 and the relevant sections of section 18, I request division.
The member from Poultney requests that the question be divided by first considering sections 1 through 7 and in section 18, subdivisions A1 through 4, subdivisions B1 and 2, and subsections C through E, and then by considering all remaining provisions of the committee report. Members, this does appear to be divisible in this manner, and when we take the first question, the vote will be taken by division. Members. Therefore, the first question is, shall the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill in the first division, which is sections 1 through 7, and in section 18, subdivisions A1 through 4, subdivisions B1 and 2, and subsection C through E of the amendment as recommended by the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs as amended? Are you ready for the question? Member from Berry City, Representative Walz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now that we've divided it, I'm not sure my comments, which place my comments fall into. So my apologies if they spill over into the other section. I rise in support of this bill. This could really be important for communities such as Berry City. I know the issues that we face are not unique to us. We already have a local registry, rental registry in Berry City, and our public safety department already does the fire and safety inspections. So that aspect of the bill would have no impact whatsoever on local properties and landlords. But there are other aspects that would be very important to us. We have a relatively low percentage of home ownership in Berry City compared to the Washington County and the rest of the state. We also have the issue of at least 40 vacant buildings within the city limits that have now just vacant, not generating any income for anybody, and of course, eventually to become a blight upon their neighborhoods. So there are sections of this bill which would be a real boon to the city of Berry. First of all, the support for first-time home ownership. We find that really important and a great asset in attracting especially younger people to the city and to Vermont. And the other part that we'd find especially attractive here in Berry City is the system of grants to allow to rehab some of these vacant properties. If we could bring back online just some of these 40 vacant buildings we have in the city, it would be a great deal, because we also have a lower than county and state average in the number of affordable available buildings, rental units. And so for that reason, I think there are ample opportunities here that could really ramp up the housing market in Berry City and the rest of Vermont and help attract a lot more people into Vermont, and would also help create jobs. So for multiple reasons, I support this bill. Thank you.
Member from Charlotte, Representative Yantachka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of S79. This bill is a significant step forward in addressing the lack of affordable housing in Vermont. I especially want to thank your House General Housing and Military Affairs Committee for including sections 16 and 17 in response to the many complaints from landlords who have had to deal with unscrupulous tenants. Maintaining a supply of rental housing depends on a trust between landlords and tenants and fulfillment of the legal obligations of both. And having said that, I do have a question. May I inquire of the reporter of section 2?
The member from Waterbury is interrogated.
Thank you. I would like to know if a homeowner who hosts a visiting exchange student or temporarily hosts someone who is working temporarily without charging rent, would they have to register?
Madam Speaker, if that room were not being used as under other circumstances to be rented out, if it was not a common thing for them to put that room out for public use, then the answer is no, they wouldn't have to register.
Okay, thank you for that answer, and thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Chittenden, Representative Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have added a number of new positions in state government this year, so many that I've lost track. And as a member of House Appropriations, I bear some responsibility for that. But S79 authorizes 6.5 new positions, and it probably by itself takes the record. This comes at a time when we have a growing pension issue that we have not solved, and nor do we know how to solve it at this point. I am not aware of any other state that has established such a statewide registry that's envisioned in S79. Last session, Madam Speaker, We gave towns, municipalities, the specific ability to adopt ordinances to regulate and set up a registry for short-term rentals. One of my 4 towns has taken advantage of that already. Madam Speaker, I cannot support the first sections of this bill, especially with a cost of 6.5 new positions that we don't know how we'll pay for in terms of the long-term pension issue related to those new employees. Thank you.
Member from Newbury, Representative Parsons.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to say I appreciate the dividing of this bill because there are certainly good aspects to it. But Madam Speaker, I long for the day that we can all understand that no matter what we tax a business, that tax is going to be paid by those using their services, purchasing their products. This holds true for landlords. Solving our housing problem by creating fees that are no doubt just going to be paid by tenants is not the way to solve our problem.
Member from Pulteney, Representative McCoy.
Madam Speaker, adding 6.5 full-time positions to state government. To be the first state in the nation to have a statewide government-run centralized rental registry of privately owned homes is something I cannot support. I have been involved in government in one way or another, both locally and at the state level, for more than 30 years. I have seen the reach of government as it continues to creep into the lives of individuals throughout those 30 years. I liken it to the flow of lava, moving ever so slowly until one day you look and the road or the house or the trees are gone, consumed by that slow-moving lava. I've reached my tipping point with this bill when it comes to the role and reach of government in the private lives of our citizens and businesses. I will be voting no on sections 1 through 7 of this bill. Thank you.
Member from Rutland, Representative Nutt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could I interrogate the presenter of section 1?
The member from Waterbury is interrogated.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I suspect this question arises from confusion on my own part, and I apologize in advance for that. But there is one point I wanted to get out of the way before the vote. So in my community, situation on the ground, an apartment's vacant, landlord does what they need to do to get it ready for rental. And then we have a health officer who comes in and inspects and issues the certificate of occupancy. Now, this is a full-time position in my city hall. So my question, Madam Speaker, is if this bill were to pass, who is doing these inspections, on the ground? Is it still my community health inspector, or is it someone from the state? That's the clarification I need, please.
From your town's perspective, member, thank you for the question. From your town's perspective, when it comes to certificates of occupancy, that would not change. Whoever issues those would continue to issue those. These are for health and safety inspections that are based on the idea of this inspection program is that it would be based on the rental housing safety codes as well as wherever the Department of Fire Safety already inspects. So if your local town health officers are issuing scheduled certificates of occupancy, I don't see that changing. Though they may include the department, but the department's the way this bill is structured is that the current system that the Department of Fire Safety has for inspecting buildings and other safety issues would remain the same as it is now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the clarification.
Member from South Burlington, Representative Kalaki.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to speak in support of S79. And since the vote has been divided, I'll just speak now about the rental registry. We need an equitable, consistent, and fair rental housing health code inspection in our state. Currently, only 4 cities, Burlington, St. Johnsbury, Barry, and Winooski have rental registries. And Brattleboro and St. Albans have inspection systems. Other communities rely on town health officers, some with little training, and who are often volunteers. We need to level the playing field for all property owners and tenants. The registry will be crucial for the state to communicate with landlords about changes in the laws. Also, during all the disbursement of our CRF funds, it would have been really important, as we heard from the administration, to have this registry to communicate about the possibilities for landlords. Also about other resources, grants, and weatherization projects that this body has put into statute. The bill also provides a complaint-based system to help residents of rental housing to have safe, healthy, and code-compliant apartments. I will talk later on at the next division about the VHIP components of the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Barrytown, Representative Leclerc.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I interrogate the presenter of sections 1 through 7, please?
The member from Waterbury is interrogated.
Madam Speaker, during your opening comments, you recited several facts. One of them was, and I want to make sure I understood it correctly, that there's 19,000 vacant units statewide. Did I hear that?
That was yes, that's the estimate we received from DHCD.
So who did you receive that from, Madam Speaker?
The Department of Housing and Community Development.
And if there is no rental registry, how do we know, where does that number come from? What data do they use to generate that number?
It was a number that was provided for us. I can't tell you how they came upon it. They have access to some of the lists that I had also listed off. But it was, I don't know how they came upon that number, but that's the number they provided us in testimony on numerous occasions.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. From what I saw, you took quite a list of testimony. How many individual landlords did you speak with? Did you take testimony from that weren't part of a larger organization? Did you happen to take any?
We took testimony from landlords, yes.
And can you quantify that? Can you say, were they Vermonters? Were they folks that own rental property, but from out of state?
No, we took testimony regarding the eviction moratorium from individual landlords, not on sections 1 through 7.
I see. Madam Speaker, did you collect what data is out there to show how many rental units are available statewide based on the data that appears to be out there already? Do you have any number there?
There's data that's available through the tax department. There's data that's available through E911. There's data that's available through through a website that's run through the Vermont Housing Finance Agency called housingdata.org. There are numerous there's grand lists for that matter that indicate where some of these buildings are, but not in a systematic way that can be used for the purposes of this bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So based on that information, do you have any idea what we're looking at statewide?
There are approximately 80,000 dwelling units in the state, and roughly 20, according to testimony we received, roughly 20 1 or 2,000 are already covered by local health and safety registries, as mentioned earlier. And that leaves over 50,000 that are not served by professional inspectors.
Thank you for that, Madam Speaker. During your testimony, do you know how many of the rental units that are out there, or rental properties, I should say, are owned by Vermonters?
Exactly? No.
Do you have any idea how many are owned by Vermonters compared to, nonprofits that are run housing?
I don't have a total number offhand. I mean, I can tell you that that the nonprofit housing organization in Central Vermont owns about 500 rental units. The one in the Northeast Kingdom owns about 500 units or more. And certainly the one in Chittenden County owns substantially more than that.
Sure. Thank you, Master. Because the point I'm trying to get to is, it's my understanding, and I don't have a specific number, but that the vast majority of rental units, rental properties in Vermont are owned by Vermonters, not some large corporation or large nonprofit. And so my concern is what's it going to do to the average Vermonter that maybe owns a small building that it's a duplex? But thank you for that, Madam Speaker. I'm curious to know, in section 1, under the heading on chapter 173, it says prevention investigation of fires, public buildings, health and safety, and energy standards. Can you speak to the energy standards part of that title?
There are energy standards that have been issued, I believe, through rental housing safety codes and by other codes that this would apply to.
So is there an expectation there, Madam Speaker, that if we have Division of Fire Safety in investigating a complaint or just looking over a unit, that they're going to be also looking at it using the energy standards as a guide?
If that's part of their inspection routine, yes.
Okay, thank you there, Madam Speaker. Moving down, I guess it's on page 4 on section 2731, the rules of inspections and variances. It speaks to the commissioners authorized to adopt rules to health, safety, sanitation, fitness for habitation. Are there existing statute for that currently, or will there be, is it reasonable to expect that there'll be new rules adopted as well?
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, where are you talking about?
Well, section 2731, the rules, inspections, and variances. Page 2847 in today's calendar.
All right, excuse me, I just need to find that again. I need to find my page 28, what?
Sorry, lost my 2847, Madam Speaker. The very bottom.
Getting there, hold on, please. Are you asking about the underlying material?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I am.
The underlying material are the areas of inspection that are being transferred from Title 18, which is the Health Department, areas of just areas where the Health Department and the town health officers were allowed to issue citations on, and those are moved to this Department of Fire Safety. So these are taken from the existing law and would be part of the transition of rules that would happen after the passage of this bill.
Thank you for that, Madam Speaker. So the expectation here is that they're just going to be adopting current statute, or is there an expectation that they're going to be developing new rules?
I think that the primary role is going to be moving, that this bill does, is moving the responsibility from the Department of Health statute into the Department of Public Safety statute. They would work together and work on the different codes and just make sure that they transitioned everything over prior to setting any new rules.
Okay, thank you for that, Madam Speaker. Moving on to section 2733. Section 3 under 2733, where it says a violation of the rules is deemed to be imminently hazardous to persons or property, the commissioner shall order the violation corrected immediately. Who is that violation going to be issued to? Let's say that we have a situation where we have a complaint-driven visit, but the inspector's in there and finds that the smoke detectors are disconnected or disabled. Is that violation going to be immediately issued to the landlord? Or if the landlord has some way, and I'd like to know how that would be, to demonstrate that everything is up to code and would anything be issued to the tenant?
Okay, may I ask again where you're referring to?
Section 2733, orders to repair, rehabilitate, or remove structure, and then subsection 3 underneath that.
Whenever a violation of rules, Madam Speaker, is that where you got? So this is
page 2849 in today's calendar.
Yep. Madam Speaker, as I see this, you're talking about the statute here that is of existing statute. Is that correct?
It is.
Right. So right now, the Department of Fire Safety, when they issue the when they see the violation, they're already allowed to see this violation and to issue a ticket on it. And it would be ticketed to the landlord primarily. But that's something that's something that the landlord might say that the tenant is responsible for that. But it's still a safety violation.
I see. So there's no provision to hold the tenant responsible. All right. Moving on to section 2734 under penalties. See here. Subsection, and I gotta find it here. Well, if you fail to register, if I've got it, I'm sorry, section 2479. I apologize, Madam Speaker. It talks about under penalties that if you're a landlord and you fail to register your unit, that you're subject up to a $100 fine, or it could be up to a $5,000 penalty.
No, Madam Speaker, that's not correct. We just amended that.
Okay, I must have missed that. Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, member. As well intended as this piece of legislation is, I have to say that I can't support it. It is not going to have the desired results that I feel that they're looking for. There is nothing in this legislation that I can see as a landlord that is balanced. I could support this wholeheartedly if there was some balance where when you go in and do an inspection and it is found that there is a violation, but that it's the tenants doing, then they have the responsibility. Right now, all the responsibility rests with the landlord. We don't even have the ability to really do an eviction. Yes, there is some changes in this language, but anybody who has ever tried to deal with that process finds it very expensive, very time confusing, and extremely frustrating. You are much better off if you have the ability just to pay your tenant to leave. I believe one of the presenters mentioned about there is a need for affordable housing, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. But when you take a look at the housing projects that we've got out there that have been done by nonprofits, we're spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit to get those. No average Vermonter can afford to compete with that whatsoever. The other part of this that I'm concerned of is Vermont has a lot of old housing stock. There is a lot of properties out there that are being used for rentals and have been for years, but were not designed or built for that case. So there's many examples out there where, whether it be ADA compliance or whatever, that it's going to be, it's just not financially viable to do that. The other concern that I have about this is we're talking about providing funding for folks to get into these units, which again, I would support, but there's no true partnership going forward here. I happen to have a 4-unit that has 12 bedrooms in it, so I end up taking families, which for the most part has worked, but it requires a lot of maintenance and oversight on my part. But there's not a true partnership going forward, because let's be clear here, if we are taking in, there's no incentive for a landlord to take a risk on anybody that's got a questionable rental history, because you as the landlord are assuming all the responsibility. If there was a true partnership there where things weren't quite working out and you could turn to somebody to help make it work, again, I would be very supportive of this. But because it's all on the landlord, as a landlord, you are truly better off to have a unit sit vacant than you are to take a risk on, again, tenants with a questionable rental history. So this is well intended, but this to me is just another example of government overreach. It's kind of like an analogy I would make is inviting the IRS to come in and look at your books. You've got you're well intended, but invariably they're going to find something, and there's just no way to bring any balance to this. So for all those reasons, I will be voting against this. Thank you.
Member from Stannard, Representative Triana.
Madam Speaker, we know that in so many towns, probably with the exception of the 4 towns that were enumerated by a member previous to my to me here, that town health officers are more often untrained and or unwilling to act upon complaints of their neighbors or to their neighbors. So, we had a number of incidents in our town that health officer really was totally reluctant to visit a property where health and safety was an issue. So for the 4 towns that have been mentioned that already have this registry and an employed professional town health officer, they're exempt from this. They don't have to. Their health officers will continue to do the work that they are already doing. What we know is that the Department of Health and Safety is much, much more qualified than doing health and safety inspections of home units, of rental units. So in that respect, we need to consider the health and safety of the tenants that rent apartments at this point in time in Vermont. It is critical to keep those folks in mind and to assure that their health and safety is the utmost concern. As far as disconnecting a smoke detector, we have made exceptions to that, to the eviction moratorium, so that under Civil Rule 65, an emergency order can be applied for by a landlord who can show by affidavit that they have been that their tenant has not complied with health and safety issues by specifically disconnecting or disarming a smoke detector. We also know that rental history is the primary cause of homelessness. We are currently spending millions and millions of dollars every week or every month, and since this pandemic has arrived, on supporting our 2,000 homeless Vermonters. So my question would be, what is reasonable? What is reasonable to expect Vermont to care for? How can we care for homeless people if we are questioning, if landlords are questioning whether or not to put an apartment back online with a grant of $30,000 to help them do that, paid for by the state of Vermont, in order to eliminate or to help with the homeless situation that we are, the predicament that we're in right now. So I support this bill. I support these sections. I think that the health and safety of Vermonters should be our consideration. It is for me, and that other issues that have arisen can be accommodated through this bill. And I stand in support of these sections. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, shall the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill in the first division, which is sections 1 through 7, and in section 18, subdivisions A1 through 4, subdivisions B1 and 2, and subsections C through E of the amendment recommended by the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs as amended. Member from Waterbury, Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to address some of the concerns that have been brought up by other members in this recent conversation. First of all, to the point of violations, if there's violations that are found, as Representative from Standard mentioned, that tenants can be cited for that. If I misspoke, I apologize. In terms of what the registry is doing, this is a $900 million a year business. And it's not just small individual landlords and not just large individual landlords, it's everybody. And for years and years, we have fought to try to get a registry simply because we don't know where these buildings are. These buildings are public buildings. These buildings are, we don't know, we don't have one systemic place to find it. As far as government overreach is concerned, I think it's clear that there are landlord certificates, there are E911 lists, there are grand lists. This information is publicly available in a bunch of different scattered places. And so it's really to the benefit of our policymaking to know where these folks are, to know where these apartments are. You know, there are always going to be some really difficult relationships between landlords and tenants. Some of the programs that have come forward since the pandemic started that rely on federal money. So at least from the end of last year and perhaps through this year, there are mediation issues, mediation programs that that can work with landlords and tenants when it's simply a back rent issue, or perhaps when it's a little bit more complex than a back rent issue. So we're making steps forward. In terms of the size of this program, being statewide, there are cities across the United States that have rental registry programs that have a much higher population than Vermont does. So we weren't really concerned with that. We were looking at the success of the rental registry programs in the municipalities that have them in Vermont, and we were responding to the pleas from the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns who are saying that their town hall health officers cannot keep cannot do the job that they've been asked to do by inspecting these apartments when tenants or landlords complain about what's going on inside them. So this is this is a proposal to create a statewide program with only 5 people to go statewide on this. We think that the request for individuals to take on this responsibility to hire 5 professional inspectors statewide is a small ask, quite frankly. And when it comes to partnerships, I know that some members have expressed the feeling that tenants have all the power, or there's no balance in the work that we do here. And I would just push back a little bit and say, when we pass laws from our committee that have to do with landlord-tenant issues, in fact, the eviction moratorium itself was written with the Vermont Landlord Association and Vermont Legal Aid side by side with us. And we considered every avenue that we could during that time to make sure that it was balanced. And that's what we do with our legislation moving forward. We may have different opinions about that, but that's what we put forward in our work. Finally, I would just say that this inspection program is actually kind of the keystone to being able to offer public funding through the VHIP program. No matter how expensive housing is to create, and we know it's very expensive. We know that folks pull their apartments off because they've had bad experiences with tenants in the past. But we also know that there's plenty of apartments that are vacant because of health and safety code violations, where there are landlords that want to bring them back on and choose voluntarily to work with the state and the housing partner organizations to find the right tenants to be in their property. And we have successful programs like Pathways that does this on a much more individual scale through not every county in the state of Vermont. So we have some experience with seeing how these programs work. This is the first time, last year was the first time that we offered funds to private landlords who were going to bring their units back online and needed some assistance from the state to help subsidize the costs. These programs are there voluntarily. A landlord can choose to participate or not, but we know that we have a housing crisis, and the fault for that does not lie with landlords, and it does not lie with tenants. It lies with all of us. And we need to try to bring units on as quickly as possible. Without a registration and enforcement program, it's really hard to justify appropriating money to private property owners without some way of inspecting and making sure that the properties that were once non-code compliant became code compliant. So that's the motivation behind having this list. It would also be an incredible resource for landlords so that when we do change the law, or we do have materials that want to be provided to inform landlords and property owners of changes in what's going on, or programs like what we're talking about here, that we'll be able to notify them. You know, there's a large communication problem across the state for every program that we try to get across. This would be an attempt to try to use this data to more properly inform the landlords. And really, finally, the $35 fee, it goes up. This fee, once it's collected, would be paying for both the registry and the enforcement program. The Department of Fire Safety works on fees. They do not use general fund dollars. It's based on receiving fees from people who are in the industry. And it's been a very successful program in the cities that have it already. And we've heard from each of those cities at various points of the success that's had. And this is a much lighter touch financially, and it's not a mandatory inspection. We're pretty proud of moving the ball forward on this level. And we would just continue to ask for the body's support. Thank you.
Member from Fairfield, Representative Gregoire.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll leave my camera off due to, let's say, challenging internet. I would just say there's definitely some good provisions to this bill. This section's, I would say, not so much. Has already been mentioned by others. Right now, there are a lot of units empty throughout Vermont. knowing of hundreds of them myself and dozens upon dozens of landlords, the testimony or the previous members have alluded to, a lot of them are empty. I would probably say a lot more are empty because of issues with tenants who have destroyed property, and this is nothing new. You have great tenants, and I used to be a landlord, but you also have bad tenants, which is why I'm no longer a landlord. And I can say that from the dozens of landlords that I know, whether we convince ourselves that we're making things easier and more equitable for them, that isn't what they feel. And I would like to remind everybody that the Landlord Association doesn't represent even a fraction of landlords. They don't. And so what I hear on the ground from people is that it's literally cheaper for them to leave a apartment or a house vacant and pay the taxes and fees, or the taxes and mortgages out of their pockets, and just wait on appreciation maybe for a day that they can sell, than it is for them to put the unit back online. And this doesn't help that. This hurts it. If we want to have more housing units, we're going to have to start holding tenants accountable for the destruction that many of them do. Now, I want to be clear, not all. There are great tenants, but there's a lot that destroy property, and then the landlord is on the hook. Nobody helps pay for that. And then they get gun shy. They don't want to rent to other people. Anyway, the registry itself, there is an additional fee. And of course, as we know, as alluded to earlier, that fees for a business are always passed on to the tenant, or to the customer. This doesn't make it cheaper for them as well. And it also doesn't consider enough, I don't think, that many of the health issues that may be found in an inspection, yes, some of them are going to be landlords. And let's be clear, there's some slumlords, absolutely. But a lot of the destruction that's going to fail is because of tenants that do not take care of the property appropriately. And there should be greater provisions to make sure that they're held accountable. And also, I keep hearing say our rental stock. It's not ours. This is private property. There's private people who pay mortgages, and they pay the taxes. They pay the upkeep. It's not ours, and we have to respect that. We shouldn't want to control every aspect of people's lives, and really just government overreach to the upteenth degree. Now, there are great parts of this bill, and the other section is very good, and I'll support that, but I can't support this one. And thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak.
Member from Barrytown, Representative Leclerc.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just looking to address a couple of the comments that I'd heard. One, we keep referring to landlords as people who have less than the best intentions for their tenants. And I will say that as a landlord, as an employer, I always want to attract and keep the best that I can. So it's in every landlord's best interest to attract and have great tenants. So I got to push back a little bit on that. Somehow we're saying that the landlords have less than, I guess, stellar reasons for doing what they do. And the other thing that I would add is that, again, as a landlord, there's already a lot of different avenues to inspect properties out there. It's my understanding that if you're a landlord that's with the Vermont Housing and you're in the Section 8 program, at least when I had those, they inspect those units annually. If you have a unit that you take a tenant in that is voucher based, where the voucher follows the tenant before they can occupy that unit, state housing comes in and inspects that. If you find yourself in a position where you're able to sell a rental unit and it continues to be a rental unit, the fire marshal does have to come in and do an inspection on the unit to make sure that it's up to code before you can sell it. So there is an awful lot of oversight already. One of the communities that was mentioned, I do own rental units in that particular community. I have to say, I'm not sure that it adds a tremendous amount of value. I guess I can make the phone call, and if I have a question, they come and inspect. But yes, I do have to pay an additional amount for that licensing. So again, I think if we did have the partnership that I've been advocating for, and we don't, it's all or nothing. If I take a tenant in, regardless of the program that they're coming to me under, all the responsibility rests with me as the landlord. And let's be clear here, most of these are multi-family units and conflict can arise. And everything winds up falling to me to address. And when we're talking about responsibility by the tenants, I can tell you from firsthand experience that I've had tenants that have moved out, that in some cases I had to pay to move out, and I took a ton of trash out of their units. So there's an awful lot of good landlords out there. Most of them are, and most of them are like me, Vermonters that are paying for this. We're not some large $900 million company. It's all average Vermonters that are trying to make a living in this state and maximize the return on their properties. So again, I do not support this.
Member from Stowe, Representative Sherman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's been a lot of discussion on this bill, and I just wanted to provide some insight as well from my experience, and also both as a person who owns and manages multifamily residential long-term housing, and as a legislator who's been talking about this for a long time and meeting with people. So first of all, I would agree completely. There is a housing crisis in Vermont. There is a housing crisis with regard to the accessibility and the affordability of housing for Vermonters, working Vermonters, low-income Vermonters, and others. There are steps on that housing ladder that are simply missing, and that is something that we must address. This bill, I'm afraid, is actually going to exacerbate that challenge. Again, I've been in this business a long time. I will say the chair of the committee, the reporter of the bill, actually indicated that these are public buildings, and they are not public buildings. They are privately owned buildings. Many of them, most of them. They are privately owned buildings by Vermonters who have invested, who have taken the risks to build such buildings, to house Vermonters, and have done so for the most part in a responsible and effective way. This bill, I'm afraid, could create the unintended consequence of actually reducing the already scarce inventory. As a landlord, I am well aware of some of the conditions, bad conditions of apartment units in Vermont. I'm certainly in favor of doing what we can to ensure the health and safety of such units, because when unhealthy and unsafe rental properties are maintained by negligent landlords, it gives all landlords, myself included, a bad name. My concern is with this kind of state program, a registry and a subsequent inspection program will, many Vermonters, and I've heard it myself from dozens now of landlords, will be reluctant to either maintain their units as long-term residential rentals or invest further in long-term residential rentals. I've been in meeting after meeting and call after call over my 15 years in the legislature with housing advocates, with low-income housing advocates, and providers who struggle every day to find housing for folks that they're serving. I ask them two questions all the time when I meet with these folks. What are we doing as a state and as a region to encourage people to invest in maintaining their housing and in building housing? And what are we doing as a region and state to discourage such investment? I'm afraid, Madam Speaker, that this bill is actually going to discourage investment. The member from Barry brought up that there are inspection programs in place. And indeed there are. And I have been part of those for me personally, as the manager of low-income HUD properties, I have been a part of those for 10 years. And I can tell you experience after experience of those inspections. And that is part of our program. That is a part of doing business. And that is what we signed up for. And I understand that. But for those who think that inspection programs are just a very simple thing to go through, and they aren't adversarial with regard to inspectors coming into your property, tenants who you're not necessarily on great terms with, doing things to sabotage those inspections, I think you are you will see your constituents are in for some surprises. I will also say I am now, obviously, one of the challenges with this bill in general is I am one of those who are on consistent inspection schedules for the majority of my units, and yet I'm still going to be placed into this as well. So I don't know, and I think that that's the case all around. I've had experience, obviously, in this legislature for a long time, and I do think that this legislature, in general, our legislature, our state, I should say, has made the decision that they would prefer to not have private landlords in the HUD realm, that they would rather it be public nonprofit landlords, and that's fine. I will just say that those of you who might have people who own properties that are regulated by HUD are now adding another state regulatory agent program to those as well. I don't know who those are, but I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Anyway, my underlying issue is that this bill, I'm afraid, again, the Landlord Association represents some landlords, myself included. It does not represent, by and large, the vast majority of Vermont landlords. And so I think hearing from your constituents, hearing from individual landlords would be a wise move on the part of members of this body. And I would encourage you to do so, to really find out what we should be doing to encourage further investment, private investment in housing, and not discourage private investment in housing. So thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'll stop there. But I urge folks to really reach out to private landlords themselves and really see what the challenges are. There's not much of an upside in this day and age to being a private landlord. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Weathersfield, Representative Arison.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I interrogate the member from Waterbury?
The member from Waterbury is interrogated.
The conversation today has revolved mostly around longer term rental, but in the definitions, it also includes overnight. Is the intention of S79 to also include Airbnbs? And a follow-up question, there are structures that are more attuned to camping. Would it also include those, including the cabins in the state parks?
Member from Waterbury, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. Madam Speaker, the bill proposes to require short-term rentals, of which there's a definition of, to pay the fee as well, to register and to pay the fee. As far as other units, it would not, I don't believe it would include state buildings, but I'd have to get back to you on that. But the idea here is to register the short-term rentals, and that would be the only requirement we have of short-term rentals.
So it definitely includes Airbnb style.
Yes, anybody who rents their accommodations for a certain amount of time as laid out in statute, which is for no more than 30 days at one rental, but more than 14 days throughout the year, would be considered a short-term rental.
Thank you.
Member from Orange, Representative Lefebvre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just would like to speak on this briefly. So I started managing properties when I was 17 years old. I have properties in one of the cities that already has a registry. And I'm quite, I guess offended is the best way to put it, at the remarks of how people portray landlords. I am one of the landlords that seeks out the people that might have a harder time finding housing because I believe in second chances. I'm also the one that seeks out properties that have been abandoned because, again, I believe in second chances. I have a very good relationship with those who come and inspect my properties because I believe that together, working together and building a team is how we're going to ever get from underneath some of the situations we have. And I can assure you, this is only going to make a bigger divide between affordable housing and those who are able to offer it to others. As other representatives have spoken today, there are many ways that we already get inspected and to get checked. And it, to me, it is very offensive and very heartbreaking to hear people portray landlords in such a way. If I get everything paid right, to me, I make $225 a month off of one of my buildings. To buy a smoke detector, if that is damaged, that is up in the 90s to meet standards of what we need for my building. That does not put in other amenities that I have to make sure are available to meet the needs, let alone if someone doesn't pay. I have gone out of my way to cover tenants to make sure that they are okay, especially during COVID. I appreciate the work of our General Housing and Military Affairs Committee, but I wish that more landlords like myself would have the opportunity to be heard and not had one larger group speak on my behalf because they do not represent me.
The question is, shall the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill in the first division, which is sections 1 through 7, and in section 18, subdivisions 1A through 4, subdivisions 1 and 2, and subsections C through E of the amendment recommended by the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs as amended. Member from Chittenden, Representative Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill?
The member from Waterbury is interrogated.
Madam Speaker, a prior question prompted me to ask for a little bit more clarification. We talk about camps. Madam Speaker, if I owned a hunting camp, which I do not, but if I did, and I wanted to rent it out for a season, and over the course of a year, it's more than 30 days, given different seasons that we have, would I need to register under this short-term rental ordinance?
If you use your camp and offer it to the public as a rental unit, then you would have to register it. If you make a common practice of using this as a rental unit, you would have to register it as a unit.
I'm not quite sure I understand, but I guess if I rent it out, I think I recall the definition being over 30 days for a short-term rental. Is that correct, Madam Speaker?
Yes, the definition in our statute for short-term rental means a furnished house, condominium, or other dwelling room or self-contained dwelling unit rented to the transient, traveling, or vacationing public for a period of fewer than 30 consecutive days and for more than 14 days per calendar year.
Okay, 14 days. Okay, thank you for that clarification. So I may assume that a lot of hunting camps may not have all the bells and whistles that we might expect in terms of septic, sewer, bathrooms, et cetera. So they may not meet the criteria. Is that a safe assumption if they were inspected, Madam Speaker?
I do not see any exemptions for that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. And one other question, and I'm not sure I heard it correctly, but I thought a prior question related to testimony from individual landlords on the registry part. And I believe the answer was no, the committee did not hear from individual landlords on this new registry. Did I hear that correctly?
You heard that correctly. We relied on the work and research done by the Rental Housing Advisory Board, which was established in 2018 by Act 188, which was made up of individuals that represented a wide swath of people in the housing industry, including individual landlords.
Okay. I appreciate that, but one of the things that always concerns me, Madam Speaker, is that whether we pass something that individual constituents may like, not like, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we heard, even if we don't agree. And I'm concerned about that. Madam Speaker, some of us may, when we're meeting in person, in session in Montpelier, may rent rooms or small apartments. Can I assume, Madam Speaker, that those also would have to be registered as part of this new registry?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, member. I guess I'm still bothered by this new rental registry program that we're setting up in addition to the number of new positions we're authorizing. So I will be voting no on this section. Thank you.
Member from Berry City, Representative Anthony.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I had the experience, which I want to share with the body, of being on the city council and being part of the majority, Madam Speaker, who favored establishing the inspection regime and registration of rental units in the city of Barry. It was roughly 20 years ago. It was a rocky start. What I want to assure the body of, though, Madam Speaker, is that the landlord population was heard from. We made it our business to take virtually a year in the process of taking testimony, establishing a fair registration fee to cover the inspections, figuring out how we would delegate the team of inspectors, and in essence blossomed into a code enforcement person who generally is attached to the fire department. But for our purposes here today, Madam Speaker, I want to tell you that the landlord population in Barry was at that time, in any case, largely peopled by relatively small scale landlords, many of whom had the variety of experiences that you've heard about today. And they decidedly partitioned into a spectrum of opinion. The folks who spent a lot of time on the front end, so to say, interviewing tenants, inquiring as to their history and their intentions of staying, and making crystal clear that there were rules that had to be followed. There was a front-end deposit fee, which was then and is now set by the landlord, although for a time the city did limit that, does not any longer. And what I'm getting to conclude is that there was a vast division of opinion amongst the landlords as to whether this was a good thing. And it tended to divide out, if you will, into folks who wanted to see this regime, because after all, at that time anyway, the landlord industry, so to say, was quite competitive. There was a vacancy rate. And needless to say, the folks who were very responsible wanted not to compete, if you will, with landlords who were not so careful, shall I say, in terms of amenities, safety issues, health issues. This was just at the beginning of mandatory installation of smoke detectors and CO2 alarms, and arguments about what kind of CO2 alarm should be used, et cetera. All I can tell you is we moved forward successfully. I think we did eliminate some dwellings that should not have been approved, are not now approved. And I think some landlords did decide that this was not a business for them. And I repeat, this did have an effect, I think, in upgrading the quality of rental properties offered to the public. And I urge the body to accept the fact that there will be some unhappy landlords and there may be some unhappy tenants. But frankly, if you're going to begin to address some of those issues, you cannot do it without a registry and a regime to visit periodically those units. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Essex, Representative Vyhovsky.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've heard a lot today about the need to hear from individual landlords and from members of this body who themselves are individual landlords. I think it's also important that we hear from individual tenants and see who exactly it is we're talking about. As a tenant in Vermont, I rise to support this bill. I grew up in Vermont. I have a master's degree. I'm a sitting state legislator, and I struggled to afford to move home after college and cannot afford to buy a home here. And I think it is unlikely without significant changes to our housing market that I will ever be able to afford to buy a home here. I've also worked for much of my career with individuals experiencing homelessness, and we undoubtedly have a multifaceted housing crisis. I've rented from multiple different landlords in Vermont, never in one of the cities with a registry, and I've had problems with the health and safety of my home with every single one of them and had no real recourse. I currently rent from a private landlord, and there's damage in my home that is considered a health hazard that my physician has reached out and spoken about. And it's been like this for years. And due to the low vacancy rates, high cost of living, and the experience with every rental being more challenging than the last, it's an untenable situation for me to move right now to a new rental, and I simply cannot afford to buy a home. Tenants are people who often have little to no other choices for where they live, and it is our obligation to protect them from substandard, unsafe living conditions. Having worked for many years with Pathways Vermont, I have worked with some of the hardest working people who have simply been failed by system after system. And I see it as our responsibility to make sure that we do everything we can to shore up the cracks in these systems so that they work towards guaranteeing safe and healthy homes. And it's my view that it is a basic human right for people to have a safe home to come back to. And therefore, I support this section of the bill so that we have systems that stop failing our tenants. Thank you.
Member from Waterbury, Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This has been a very good conversation, and it really illustrates some key points in why the registry is necessary. But I do want to make two things clear. When we do our work on landlord-tenant law in committee, and I mentioned this earlier, we move to strike a balance. The conversations that we have had in committee over the last 2 years, the last year and change since the beginning of the pandemic, especially, have shown me that people from the two disparate sides can get together and formulate, in our case, statute that works in a balanced way. Our committee does not diminish the importance or disrespect landlords as their chosen profession, nor do we hold tenants up as being faultless and the necessary receptors of a law that is out of balance. We really try to strike a balance, and we did that with this bill. Second, I would like to just make a correction. The public building definition in Title 20, 2730, Section 2. No, I'm sorry. Basically says that if you are using your building for accommodations and you rent it out and you take money for that, that it's a public building for the sake of being inspected. So just to close from our perspective, I think that I ask for your support. I think this section of the bill has been written fairly and will do wonders for us, we hope, in trying to alleviate the housing crisis that's in front of us. And Madam Speaker, when the vote is taken, I request that the vote be taken by roll.
Will the clerk please lower their hands? The member from Waterbury moves that when the vote be taken, it be taken by roll. Is the member sustained? The member is sustained. When the vote is taken, it will be taken by roll. The question is, shall the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill in the first division, which is sections 1 through 7, and in section 18, subdivision A 1 through 4, and subdivision B 1 and 2, and subsection C through E of the amendment, recommended by the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs as amended. Are you ready for the question? Member from Manchester, Representative James.
Sorry, Speaker, that was an accident.
Member from Northfield, Representative Gosler.
I talked to this bill.
Member, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Bill to me is nothing more than about more.
Member,
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
you're still a little shaky.
Or is that before I began?
There you go. We can hear you now. There you go.
Madam Speaker, I do not support all sections of this bill. This bill, to me, is more about government control of eliminating landlords. All this does is add more cost to live in this state, and more residents will leave. Think about it. Would you invest your money in a rental unit? The end result is that there will be even more empty, rundown properties in Vermont. Let's work together to make this state more affordable and safer and welcoming to all. Thank you.
Member from Barrytown, Representative McFawn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, could I inquire of the presenter of the bill, please?
The member from Waterbury is interrogated.
Madam Speaker, if I would like to bring attention to section 2734, the penalties section. And the question I have is, if an owner of an apartment decides after an inspection not to rehabilitate the units in the building and is trying to empty the building, are any of these penalties that are listed here, does that owner of the building have to pay those penalties?
I would imagine that if that owner, if they are taking that building off the market and it's no longer a rental building, that they would not be subject to registration.
Are you sure of that?
I'm reading the law. I'm reading the law as it stands, Madam Speaker. Is that if you have a rental unit you have to register it. If you're not using it for a rental unit and it goes fallow as a rental unit, then you don't have to register.
Okay, so then, just to make double sure, under that section penalties, under B2, a person who fails to comply with an order requiring notice shall be fined $200 each day. For neglecting commencing with the effective date of such order or the date such order is finally determined. Are you sure now that the landlord is not going, while they're trying to empty that building, they're not going to have to pay that fee or that fine?
Madam Speaker, I'm not sure about am I sure.
Well,
the text is clear that if you're using the building as a rental unit, that you have to register. And if you've missed the registration date, then you will be penalized. If you are actively taking the building off of the market, then you don't have to register.
okay, not even while you're trying to empty the building and it's being rented.
If it's being rented, then you need to pay a registration fee.
I get that. I get the paying of the fee. My concern is it takes a while to have tenants leave the building. And the building is no longer, because of the inspection that was done, you've got a written notice that you have to do certain things, put fire doors in or whatever you have to do. And you as a landlord decide, I'm not going to do that, but it takes you 5 or 6 months to have the tenants leave. And you'll have to go through, if some of them don't want to leave because they don't have a place to live, it's going to take a while to get them out. My question is, while that's going on, would that landlord have to, would they be subject to any of these penalties that are listed? Your answer is no, from what you're saying right now.
I can get it, Madam Speaker, I can get a clarification on that before third reading if you'd so wish.
I would appreciate it.
Thank you.
The other question that I have is if, let's say now that we've gone to the point where the building is empty and it's not being rented anymore, does that have any bearing on the property tax that landlord will have to pay?
Madam Speaker, we didn't take testimony on property tax values in this bill.
Maybe if the person from the Ways and Means Committee, could they answer that question?
Point of order.
Member from Heartland, what is your point of order?
I don't believe this bill is addressing property tax, so I'm not sure where this line of inquiry is going. It seems out of order.
Members, give me one quick moment to confer with the clerk. Thank you, members. I have conferred with the clerk, and member from Heartland, without hearing more of the line of questioning and where the member from Berrytown was going, I think we were right at that line. So at this point, I would ask if a member from Ways and Means can answer that question and just caution the member on the question at hand.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, if you're referring to me, and I'm happy to answer.
There's member from Thetford.
If the member could restate the question. If the member from Berrytown, I guess, could restate the question so I can answer clearly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The question is this: if the apartment house is considered unrentable now because it's been found in violation and the landlord has emptied the building, is there any effect? How does it affect the property tax that the landlord was paying prior to being found that the units could not be rented unless they were all rehabilitated?
I guess I would give the member several answers, Madam Speaker. As the member just stated, how would it affect property taxes just prior to vacating the building? I guess the property taxes as assigned by the listers in that town or city would stand. If the building has to be vacated, then I guess the member would have to take it up with the listers there. There's nothing in our statute, nothing in this bill that directly affects value of properties one way or the other. It's an interesting question, but I don't think the bill addresses that question, and I don't think that I could address it other than saying take it up with the local listers or the Board of Civil Authority if the landowner, property owner, thinks he has an issue with valuation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does that conclude your questioning, member?
Yes, it does. I look forward to, before third reading, that the penalties part be answered. Thank you.
Member from Clarendon, Representative Peterson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. May I interrogate the presenter of these sections?
Member from Waterbury is interrogated.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to follow up on what the esteemed member from Chittenden talked about a little earlier, revolving around camps. Across from my house right now, there's a neat little camp tucked in the woods. It's about 100 yards into the woods. It has no power. It has no water, or it might have gravity fed, I'm not sure. There's a wood stove in it and an outhouse, okay? If I were to buy that property and rent it out during hunting season, my question is, if I register it, would an inspector inspect it with the nature of the property or the rental in mind, or would the inspector have a one-size-fits-all approach and flatly turn it down? Doesn't have power, doesn't have indoor plumbing, doesn't have any of these things. It's just a question. I'm wondering how it would be treated.
Madam Speaker, my interpretation of their inspections would treat it as, first of all, as a short-term rental if it's only being rented out during a particular time of year, and that they would only respond to any issues with the camp itself. Based on their testimony, they are a complaint-driven organization. So if someone who was renting the camp complained to the Department of Fire Safety because there were unsafe living conditions, then they might make a visit out to the camp. It being a camp, obviously there's limitations as to what it might have with respect to electric or septic or what have you. And you know, my interpretation is that, and I stand to be corrected, but my interpretation is that they would not be issuing health and safety tickets based on the nature of the building itself, unless it was obviously wrong, which they would only know if they were brought in by complaint.
Okay, so they would not be brought in regularly then to look at it, or would they?
No, Madam Speaker, this bill does not require mandatory inspections of rental properties by the Department of Fire Safety.
Okay, so it would take a complaint to do it.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
The question is, shall the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill in the first division, which is sections 1 through 7, and in section 18, subdivisions A1 through 4, subdivision B1 and 2, and subsections C through E of the amendment recommended by the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs as amended. Are you ready for the question?
Are you taking a shower?
Member from Dover, Representative Sebelia.
I'll turn it because it's facing the wrong way. Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I briefly interrogate the presenter of the bill?
The member from Waterbury is interrogated.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Following up on the last set of questions, are there any restrictions on who may file a complaint and on, on who may file a complaint? And then I'm thinking about in the instance of a camp that has no water and it's rented out. And then there's a complaint that is filed that there's no water. Are there any protections in that case? Or how would a landlord kind of protect themselves in that case? Can they do that contractually? Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Madam Speaker, did I hear two questions in that?
There were two questions. Yes. Are there any restrictions on who can file the complaint? Number one. And then number two, could the member speak just briefly about how someone might protect themselves from kind of a scurrilous claim? So you're renting a camp that has no water and then complaining that it has no water. So how would a landlord be protected in that case?
The answer to your first question, Madam Speaker, is no. And I would imagine the answer to your second question is that if the landlord or property owner is leasing or renting out their property under certain conditions, and those conditions are met, then that complaint would probably be ignored, or it would not be held against, it would not be ticketed. But I can't make that decision. That's a decision that the Department of Fire Safety would make. But I would assume on a contract-based level, if there is a contract, that that tenant wouldn't be able to make that claim if they were just complaining about something that already exists, unless it has unless the condition of it has changed.
Unless the condition has changed. So, okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are you ready for the question? If so, the clerk shall commence to call the roll.
Aki of Middletown Springs.
No.
Representative Aki votes no. Ansel of Calais.
Yes.
Representative Ansel votes yes. Anthony of Berry City.
Yes.
Representative Anthony votes yes. Arison of Weathersfield.
Yes.
Representative Arison votes yes. Austin of Colchester.
Yes.
Representative Austin votes yes. Bartholomew of Heartland.
Yes.
Representative Bartholomew votes yes. Batchelor of Derby.
No.
Representative Batchelor votes no. Beck of St. Johnsbury.
No.
Representative Beck votes no. Byrong of Virgins.
Yes.
Representative Byrong votes yes. Black of Essex.
Yes.
Representative Black votes yes. Bloomley of Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Bloomley votes yes. Bach of Chester.
Yes.
Representative Bach votes yes. Bongarts of Manchester.
Yes.
Representative Bongarts votes yes. Boslin of Westminster.
Yes.
Representative Boslin votes yes. Brady of Williston.
Yes.
Representative Brady votes yes. Brennan of Colchester.
No.
Representative Brennan votes no. Briglin of Thetford.
Yes.
Representative Briglin votes yes. Brown of Richmond.
Yes.
Representative Brown votes yes. Brownell of Pownell.
No.
Representative Brownell votes no. Brumstead of Shelburne.
Yes.
Representative Brumstead votes yes. Burdett of West Rutland. Brick of Brattleboro.
Yes.
Representative Brick votes yes. Burrows of West Windsor.
Yes.
Representative Burrows votes yes. Campbell of St. Johnsbury.
Yes.
Representative Campbell votes yes. Canfield of Fairhaven.
No.
Representative Canfield votes no. Chase of Colchester.
I certify this is Representative Chase of Colchester. I vote yes.
Representative Chase votes yes. Christie of Hartford.
Yes.
Representative Christie votes yes. Chena of Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Chena votes yes. Coffee of Guilford.
Yes.
Representative Coffee votes yes. Colburn of Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Colburn votes yes. Colson of Winooski.
Yes.
Representative Colson votes yes. Conlon of Cornwall.
Yes.
Representative Conlon votes yes. Copeland Hansis of Bradford. Corcoran of Bennington.
No.
Representative Corcoran votes no. Cordis of Lincoln.
Yes.
Representative Cordis votes yes. Copley of Rutland City.
No.
Representative Copley votes no. Dickinson of St. Albans Town.
No.
Representative Dickinson votes no. Dolan of Essex. Dolan of Waitsfield.
Yes.
Representative Dolan of Waitsfield votes yes. Donahue of Northfield.
No, and I'd like to explain my vote.
Representative Donahue votes no. Donnelly of Hyde Park.
Yes.
Representative Donnelly votes yes. Durfee of Shaftesbury.
Yes.
Representative Durfee votes yes. Elder of Starksboro.
Yes.
Representative Elder votes yes. Emmons of Springfield.
Yes.
Representative Emmons votes yes. Fagan of Rutland City.
No.
Representative Fagan votes no. Feltus of Linden.
No.
Representative Feltus votes no. Gannon of Wilmington.
No.
Representative Gannon votes no. Goldman of Rockingham.
Yes.
Representative Goldman votes yes. Ghostland of Northfield.
No.
Representative Ghostland votes no. Grad of Moortown.
Yes.
Representative Grad votes yes. Graham of Williamstown.
No.
Representative Graham votes no. Gregoire of Fairfield.
No.
Representative Gregoire votes no. Hango of Berkshire.
I certify that this is Representative Lisa Hango of Berkshire, and I vote no.
Representative Hango votes no. Harrison of Chittenden.
No.
Representative Harrison votes no. Helm of Fairhaven.
No.
Representative Helm votes no. Higley of Lowell.
No.
Representative Higley votes no. Hooper of Montpelier.
Yes.
Representative Hooper of Montpelier votes yes. Hooper of Randolph.
Yes.
Representative Hooper of Randolph votes yes. Hooper of Burlington.
I vote yes.
Representative Hooper of Burlington votes yes. Houghton of Essex.
Yes.
Representative Houghton votes yes. Howard of Rutland City.
Yes.
Representative Howard votes yes. James of Manchester.
Yes.
Representative James votes yes. Jerome of Brandon.
Yes.
Representative Jerome votes yes. Jessup of Middlesex.
Yes.
Representative Jessup votes yes. Kalaki of South Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Kalaki votes yes. Kimball of Woodstock.
Yes.
Representative Kimball votes yes. Kitzmiller of Montpelier.
Yes.
Representative Kitzmiller votes yes. Kornheiser of Brattleboro.
Yes.
Representative Kornheiser votes yes. LeClaire of Berrytown.
No.
Representative LeClaire votes no. Lalonde of South Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Lalonde votes yes. Lanford of Virgins.
Yes.
Representative Lanford votes yes. Lefebvre of Newark.
No.
Representative Lefebvre of Newark votes no. Lefebvre of Orange.
No.
Representative Lefebvre of Orange votes no. Leffler of Venusburg. Lippert of Heinsberg.
Yes.
Representative Lippert votes yes. Long of Newfane.
Yes.
Representative Long votes yes. Marcotte of Coventry. Martell of Waterford.
No.
Representative Martell votes no. Martin of Franklin. Maslin of Thetford.
Aye.
Representative Maslin votes yes. Matos of Milton.
No.
Representative Matos votes no. McCarthy of St. Albans City.
Yes.
Representative McCarthy votes yes. McCormick of Burlington. McCoy of Pulteney.
No.
Representative McCoy votes no. McCullough of Williston.
Aye.
Representative McCullough votes yes. McFawn of Berrytown.
No.
Representative McFawn votes no. Morgan L. of Milton.
No.
Representative Morgan L. votes no. Morgan M. of Milton.
No.
Representative Morgan M. votes no. Morris of Springfield.
Yes.
Representative Morris votes yes. Morrissey of Bennington.
I certify that I am Representative Morrissey of Bennington and vote no.
Representative Morrissey votes no. Mrowicki of Putney.
I certify this is Representative Mrowicki. I vote yes.
Representative Mrowicki votes yes. Mulvaney Stanek of Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Mulvaney Stanek votes yes. Murphy of Fairfax.
Yes.
Representative Murphy votes yes. Nicole of Ludlow.
Yes.
Representative Nicole votes yes. Niger of Bennington.
Yes.
Representative Niger votes yes. Norris of Sheldon.
No.
Representative Norris of Sheldon votes no. Norris of Shoreham.
No.
Representative Norris of Shoreham votes no. Not of Rutland City.
Yes.
Representative Not votes yes. Noyes of Wolcott.
No.
Representative Noyes votes no. O'Brien of Tunbridge.
Yes.
Representative O'Brien votes yes. Odie of Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Odie votes yes. Page of Newport City.
No.
Representative Page votes no. Payala of Londonderry.
Yes.
Representative Payala votes yes. Pulaski of Milton.
Oh.
Representative Pulaski votes no. Parsons of Newberry.
No.
Representative Parsons votes no. Partridge of Wyndham.
Yes.
Representative Partridge votes yes. Pat of Worcester.
Yes.
Representative Pat votes yes. Pearl of Danville.
I certify that this is Representative Henry Pearl of Danville, and I vote yes.
Representative Pearl votes yes. Peterson of Clarendon.
No.
Representative Peterson votes no. Pugh of South Burlington. Rachelson of Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Rachelson votes yes. Redmond of Essex.
Yes.
Representative Redmond votes yes. Rogers of Waterville.
No.
Representative Rogers votes no. Rosenquist of Georgia.
No.
Representative Rosenquist votes no. Sakowitz of Randolph.
Yes.
Representative Sakowitz votes yes. Savage of Swanton.
No.
Representative Savage votes no. Shy of Middlebury.
Yes.
Representative Shy votes yes. Sherman of Stowe.
No.
Representative Sherman votes no. Seymour of Sutton.
I certify this is Representative Patrick Seymour of Sutton and vote no.
Representative Seymour votes no. Shaw of Pittsford.
No.
Representative Shaw votes no. Sheldon of Middlebury.
Yes.
Representative Sheldon votes yes. Sibilia of Dover.
No.
Representative Sibilia votes no. Sims of Craftsbury.
Yes.
Representative Sims votes yes. Small of Winooski.
Yes.
Representative Small votes yes. Smith of Derby.
No.
Representative Smith of Derby votes no. Smith of New Haven.
No.
Representative Smith of New Haven votes no. Squirrel of Underhill.
Yes.
Representative Squirrel votes yes. Stebbins of Burlington. Stevens of Waterbury.
Yes, and I'd like to explain my vote.
Representative Stevens votes yes. Strong of Albany.
No.
Representative Strong votes no. Sullivan of Dorset.
No.
Representative Sullivan votes no. Supernaut of Barnard.
Yes.
Representative Supernaut votes yes. Taylor of Colchester.
Yes.
Representative Taylor votes yes. Terenzini of Rutland Town.
I certify Representative Terenzini of Rutland Town, and I vote no.
Representative Terenzini votes no. Till of Jericho.
Yes.
Representative Till votes yes. Tolino of Brattleboro.
Yes.
Representative Tolino votes yes. Toof of St. Albans Town.
No.
Representative Toof votes no. Townsend of South Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Townsend votes yes. Troiano of Stannard.
Vote yes.
Representative Troiano votes yes. Vihovsky of Essex.
I vote yes.
Representative Vihovsky votes yes. Waltz of Berry City.
Yes.
Representative Waltz votes yes. Webb of Shelburne. White of Bethel.
No.
Representative White of Bethel votes no. White of Hartford.
Yes.
Representative White of Hartford votes yes. Whitman of Bennington.
Yes.
Representative Whitman votes yes. Williams of Granby.
No.
Representative Williams votes no. Wood of Waterbury.
Yes.
Representative Wood votes yes. Yakavoni of Morristown.
Yes.
Representative Yakavoni votes yes. Yantochka of Charlotte.
Yes.
Representative Yantochka votes yes. Burdett of West Rutland. Copeland Hansis of Bradford. Dolan of Essex.
Representative Dolan of Essex votes yes.
Representative Dolan of, thank you, sorry. Representative Dolan of Essex votes yes. Leffler of Enosburg. Marcotte of Coventry. Martin of Franklin. McCormick of Burlington.
This is Representative Kurt McCormick, and I vote yes.
Representative McCormick votes yes. Pugh of South Burlington. Stebbins of Burlington.
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Stebbins votes yes. Webb of Shelburne.
Yes.
Representative Webb votes yes.
For purposes of explanation, member from Northfield, Representative Donahue.
Madam Speaker, I believe the unintended consequences of this part of the bill will be a loss of rental housing capacity and an increase in lack of housing affordability. That's the last thing we need. I cannot support it.
Member from Waterbury, Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to correct a statement I made a moment ago. During the roll call, I looked up the statute regarding hunting camps, and they would be exempt from this registration as they are not considered a dwelling unit under 9 VSA Chapter 137.
Member from South Burlington, Representative Pugh.
Madam Speaker, may I have permission to vote?
You may.
Pugh of South Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Pugh votes yes.
Member from Burlington, Representative Chena.
Madam Speaker, may I explain my vote?
You may.
Madam Speaker, our extractive economy was built on stolen land and does not recognize our birthright as humans to live freely upon the earth. It treats housing and access to the land as commodities that can be bought, leased, and sold. Under these conditions, we must protect people from exploitation and abuse, and we must find more ways to make housing accessible and affordable to all. I vote yes because housing is a human right. Thank you.
For those of you just joining us, the clerk is counting the votes on our roll call. When the clerk is ready, please announce the results of the vote.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Those voting yes, 93. Those voting no, 51.
The ayes have it, and you have proposed to the Senate to amend the bill in the first division of the recommended amendment. Now the question is, shall the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill in the second division, which is the remainder of the amendment recommended by the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs as amended? Are you ready for the question? Member from Rutland, Representative Nutt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could I quickly interrogate the presenter of Section 8?
The member from Waterbury is interrogated.
Thank you.
Section 8 is the representative from Burlington.
The member from Burlington is interrogated.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I had one question. In Section 8, it mentions that $30,000 per unit is the grant or loan limit for fixing up offline housing apartments to get them back into the market. And I just was wondering, does that amount need to be applied directly to the unit for the unit, or can it be a sum, like the number of units in a building total would increase, could be the combined 30 plus 30 and so on. What I'm thinking of is in my downtown, we've been trying to get more residents in our downtown for literally decades. And there are empty spaces where 50 years ago, there were hairdressers, there were retail shops that are all on the ground floor now. And quite often when people look at these buildings, 4 or 5 story buildings to fix up, it's not the apartments themselves that are the real fiscal challenge. It's the elevator that services the building, which has not been used in decades and would be well beyond $30,000 to bring online. So again, my question is, when we're talking $30,000 per unit, can that be pooled together to fix up one building instead of just being a apartment by apartment expense? Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate this question. I am not aware that we actually discussed this in committee, and I would like to yield to the member from Waterbury because it has a history that precedes my service. Thank you.
The member from Burlington yields to the member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the question, member. The short answer is no. This is a per unit. This is a per unit number. We recognize, and the department that supported this, that introduced it, and the stakeholders recognize that $30,000 or $36,000 may not, quote unquote, go very far. But the element of it that is important is that it would be contributing to bringing it off the market, whether that means extra money that they could be used for fixing the electric or the plumbing. But it was not contemplated that it would be for that a 3-unit system would be considered, or however you were just framing it. My understanding is that it would be, the application would have to be per unit.
Thank you for your answer. I would hope that certainly we're going to work on this issue beyond this bill. And I would hope that's something that could be considered in the future, because I know my community isn't the only one with apartment potential in our downtowns that just needs that sort of investment. But thank you for the answer. And while I'm disappointed in the answer, it certainly doesn't prevent me from voting in favor of this section of the bill. Thank you.
Member from Swanton, Representative Savage.
Thank you.
Oh, member, you're muted.
I'm having a great amount of difficulty. Sorry about that today, Madam Speaker. May I interrogate the reporter on section I believe it was in section 8 or 9. I also lost my place when I wasn't muted where I was.
The member from Burlington is interrogated.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, in reading the bill, and where it mentions about members of the disadvantaged communities, such as the Blacks, Indigenous, people of color, that they are not afforded home ownership in the same degree as it would be nationally for that same segment of the population. And it was mentioned that they were being probably some widespread discrimination. Did you get any information as to just who is doing the discriminating? Did you able to draw from that? In other words, was it the landlords, the sellers of the property, the realtors, the lenders? Did you get drill into that at all?
Well, we took extensive testimony from scholars not in relation to this bill, but in relation to other bills that discuss the historic patterns of discrimination that have existed and are well documented in many books and scholarly studies. And so we the operative word in the legislation is historic. We are describing an historic trend that has affected homeownership rates in the United States and in Vermont. So there is, we're describing a general pattern and not specific instances.
Okay, thank you. Did you take testimony? I know he was on the witness list, the president of the Vermont Bankers Association. Did you get into that subject with that individual at all?
To my knowledge, no, though the banking establishment is often is a partner in trying to close that gap. Because of these well-documented historic trends.
Right, I understand that they would be, but I'm looking for like specific cases in the state of Vermont. If there were any.
No, what we had is the statistic that I quoted earlier, which is that there is a home ownership discrepancy in the state that is significant. 72.3% of white Vermonters own homes versus 21.1%, and that is half the national average.
Right.
And scholars of home ownership and home policy and lending practices have well established the ways in which these patterns have played out over the last 70 years.
Right. So, okay, I have a certain knowledge of the lending practices in the state, having done it for many, many years. And I would think that the compliance efforts of the federal regulatory agencies in this state, I don't believe that I can recall in the last 45 years or so have ever uncovered any pattern of discriminatory lending practices. I was just curious as to whether that was touched upon or not.
Well, Madam Speaker, this was a priority for the governor, who drew attention to the discrepancy in homeownership rates along race lines, and our program and that particular section of the bill responds specifically to what exists right now. And not to individual acts of discrimination. It is a recognition that there is a wide gap between white and Black home ownership in the state, and that this program, the Revolving Home Loan Program, is an opportunity to address that.
Right. Okay. No, I understand that, and I do support this portion of the bill. I think it certainly it's a lot of good parts to it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Thetford, Representative Maslin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have three things to offer in support of this bill. The first one has to do with with tenants. Earlier in my career, I spent quite a bit of time rehabilitating inner city housing, and I am very aware of what a lot of good this bill and the housing registry would do for the sake of tenants, large and small, all around Vermont. From the perspective of landlords, I represent some very small towns, and there are some very small towns on the perimeter of my district, whereas you've heard this morning and now this afternoon, health officers are overwhelmed, frequently not trained well, and often don't know where to turn, as that applies also to their landlords, who don't know where to turn when there are issues that are beyond the simple current simple inspection by health and safety, because what what the Department of Fire Safety can inspect is really perspective was rather limited, and it doesn't help landlords who are in dire need of some serious help. Then with regards to affordable housing, we've heard that this bill may curtail or shorten up the availability of rental housing, and I think actually the opposite is the case. In our various committees, we have heard of shortages in one profession or another, and one in this state is nurses. And we've had complaints that our fees are too high for nurse licensees, but in fact, it's the lack of affordable housing in many cases that prevents nurses from moving in or settling or staying here. What this bill will do is, over time, increase the availability of affordable housing by bringing more units back online, by upgrading the quality and habitability of units who really could use a little sprucing up or a little serious corrective action. And for those reasons and many others, I clearly support the bill and urge all of us to vote in favor. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from South Burlington, Representative Kalaki.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to speak in support of these two aspects of the bill and the VHAP program. We learned a lot during COVID, and we beta tested the renovation part of it. And with CRF funds, we did bring back 208 units online, which is really important because we have a crisis about to hit us in this summer. There are 2,000 people living in emergency shelter and hotels. As of July 1st, 600 of those people are expected no longer to qualify. And then as of October 1st, another 600. So we have to continue building out supportive housing for our most fragile. And this component does that. It did very well with COVID relief money. And now, as the governor proposed, and it was really the Department of Housing and Community Development, we worked very closely with them. So this is a great program that works. We just need to keep it going to really deal with what's about to hit us in the next 6 months. So that's the first part. The second part, again, the governor really thought the revolving loan plan fund was important, and it was, we will be working with community-based organizations to engage in outreach to Vermonters who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. But all Vermonters, if they qualify, can also apply for these loans. Okay, so I think that's really important to understand. And, the whole bill, I just want to make sure people understand that it was the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, the Department of Fire Safety, the Department of Health, Department of Housing and Community Development, Vermont Housing Conservation Board, Vermont Legal Aid, and Vermont Landlords Association helped craft this whole bill with us. And this part in particular was a great partnership with our administration. So I really support all of us to support this aspect of the bill as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Standard, Representative Troiano.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll try not to echo the member from Burlington who just spoke eloquently on this, but we did find in our committee that the VHAP program was one of the most successful programs that we had initiated in the past year by supplying COVID funds and putting well over 200 units back online to help house our homeless Vermonters. We know this program. We heard from the Commissioner of Commerce and Economic Development and Community Development that this would be an ideal way for them to identify apartments that they can fund to bring back online. And funding is the key word. I think that $30,000 to bring an apartment back online is a great incentive. And that's exactly what we have found at the end of the expenditure of the care funds that we appropriated to this agency last year. They found that they had many more applications by the end of this program than they could accommodate. So we're about to appropriate another between $4 and $9 million to this program. Why did we do that? Because it was such a success. And if this bill, this registry can add to the identification of properties that can be brought online and rented to people coming out of homelessness, then we need to recognize that, and we need to move on that. Now, no one that I had heard is speaking disparagingly against landlords. We heard from landlords. We heard from landlords who were, and we felt compelled to make some exceptions to the moratorium on evictions. Why? Because they told us stories that were compelling. They told us that they had situations that we thought were not consistent with the moratorium that we put on last year. So we worked with them, and we worked well with them. We understand that being a landlord is not an easy task. There are many issues that come up all the time. And having served with one of the members of the House here a number of years ago, who was having issues with a tenant, and we had many conversations about it. And I certainly identify with the issues that landlords have these days. So as the member from Waterbury mentioned, that we really have to walk a fine line here. We try to balance the issues of the interests of landlords and tenants. But what we really don't want to do is create more homeless Vermonters. As it was just mentioned, we have 2,000 Vermonters that are still living in motels. Come July 1, somewhere around 650 of those individuals will be set out of their homes right now. This is critical. This we cannot continue to have as a situation here in Vermont. So I guess that's what I wanted to say. I stand in total support of this bill, including these sections that are up for vote now. And I urge the other members to understand that health and safety of Vermonters is at issue here, and that ultimately this bill will add to our housing, particularly the revolving loan fund that, as we heard, the governor does support, and the VHIP program that has brought multiple units online during this crisis. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Poultney, Representative McCoy.
Madam Speaker, I would like to thank the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs for their hard work on sections 8 through 16, especially the VHIP program and the eviction moratorium tweak. And I will be supporting these sections. Thank you.
The question is, shall the House propose to the Senate to amend the bill in the second division, which is the remainder of the amendment recommended by the Committee on General Housing and Military Affairs as amended? Are you ready for the question? If so, please unmute yourselves for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
No.
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 The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have proposed to the Senate to amend the bill in the second division of the recommended amendment. Now the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, please unmute yourselves for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Nay. Oh.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and third reading is ordered. Members, at this point, we are going to recess, but before that, there's going to be a request to interrupt rules or orders of the day in order to make announcements.
Madam Speaker,
Member from Burlington.
I'd like to make a motion to interrupt orders of the day for the purpose of making announcements.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Aye.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended our rules to interrupt orders of the day for the purposes of making announcements. Representative Chena. Can we
Madam
please get
Speaker.
an all, I'm sorry, member, hold one moment. Can we please get an all mute? Thank you. Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, we just had a very spirited debate, so it might be nice before lunch to just take a moment for an announcement that reminds us of our humanity, our common humanity. Today is the day before adjournment, a time of great tension and urgency, a time where we experience the labor pains as we bear witness to the birth of a new state budget during the height of spring. And as life violently bursts forth from the earth of these green mountains, a new fiscal year is born again peacefully through the processes of our democracy for the state government of Vermont. Today is also the birthday of a powerful woman who has had a tremendous influence on the world. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge this very special woman who's had a great influence on my life, the legendary singer and icon, Cher. Madam Speaker, may I read a quote from Cher?
You may.
I'm dancing solo in the dark on the club floor. I need to let go, shake it off, stop thinking about you. I lose myself in the beat of the drum, trying to forget what you done. But honey, this is a battle that you haven't won. Torn up, busted, taken apart, I've been broken down, left with a broken heart, but I'm stronger, strong enough to rise above. This is a woman's world. This is a woman's world. Tell the truth. This is a woman's world. So please join me today on Cher's birthday and through the words of Cher to acknowledge the arrival into this world of another great woman who is a member of this body, another great warrior who will keep telling the truth and who will be strong enough to rise above even when she feels broken down with a broken heart. Please join me today in celebrating the birthday of the member from Essex, Representative Vyhovsky.
Happy birthday, member.
Wow, happy birthday.
Member from Guilford, Representative Coffey.
Madam Speaker, I just wanted to make an announcement that the Women's Caucus will not be meeting at our usual time tomorrow. You should have received an email in your inbox from Representative Bloomley, but we look forward to gathering during the off session.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, the House will stand in recess until the fall of the gavel, approximately